Chapter 1976. Jiao Yan's sudden appearance left Lu Yi unperturbed, but Zhu Yuan turned pale with fright. He hurriedly looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly said, "This is Senior Jiao Yan from Jia. She's been cultivating on the island recently." Zhu Yuan had traveled the 10,000 manifestation sea before, so he had naturally heard of Jiao Yan's name. He hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Senior Jiao Yan." Jiao Yan's silent pressure not only made Lu Yi nervous, but also made Zhu Yuan nervous. Beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. At one point, Lu Yi even felt that Jiao Yan's magic power was about to go berserk. But for some reason she managed to suppress it. Then she slowly turned her head and looked at Lu Yi. "Your friend?" Lu Yi hurriedly replied, "Yes." "Why are you here?" Jiao Yan asked again. "Brother Zhu wants to buy something, but he's not familiar with the 10,000 manifestations sea, so he asked me to take him to the 10,000 manifestations island." He casually made up a story. Jiao Yan didn't speak. After a while her figure suddenly disappeared. Only her voice could be heard. "Let's go." "Yes." Lu Yi hurriedly replied. After a short while, he took Zhu Yuan to the 10,000 manifestations island and entered the 10,000 manifestations chamber of commerce. Half a day later, the two left the 10,000 manifestations chamber of commerce and flew toward the 10,000 manifestations sea. When they reached a desolate star and entered a secret place, Lu Yi set up a formation to conceal them. Only then did Zhu Yuan let out a long sigh of relief. "Senior, you can come out now," Lu Yi softly called out. A shadow flashed out of Zhu Yuan's body and condensed into Ma Bin's figure. Compared to a few months ago, Ma Bin's current state seemed to be worse. Even his face was slightly pale. "Jiao Yan is really something." Ma Bin's face was full of admiration. He looked at Lu Yi. "How did you get involved with her?" Lu Yi smiled bitterly. "She's the backer of the island. She suddenly came to the island and occupied the spirit jade mine to cultivate." "Did she discover you?" "I sense something, but I'm not sure. Moreover, she doesn't know it's me. Otherwise she wouldn't have held back," Ma Bin said. "Since the spirit jade mine has been seized by her, it's my fate." "It's fine." Lu Yi understood Ma Bin's meaning and immediately said, "Although we can't use the island's spirit jade mine for the time being, there are other places to go." "There's a place to go?" Ma Bin's face was filled with astonishment, but he soon remembered that Lu Yi had indeed mentioned a third mineral lode. "Senior, please wait a moment." After a while, a spirit inscription suddenly flashed in front of Lu Yi and disappeared, followed by another Lu Yi appearing out of thin air. Surprisingly, it was the master who had received the news from his doppelganger and had hurried over. He raised his hand and recalled the precious blood clone. Zhu Yuan was dumbfounded. Even Ma Bin showed an interested expression. What kind of doppelganger technique is this? Even he hadn't been able to see any flaws. Although his strength had been damaged, he had lived for so many years and his eyesight was still there. Lu Ye's move was truly unexpected. "It's just a small trick, not worth mentioning." Lu Yi didn't know how to explain that this was the blood race's precious blood doppelganger, so he casually changed the topic. He took out the blue sea snail and blew it. Soon, a door appeared in front of him. "Senior, please follow me." Saying so, Lu Yi took the lead and walked in, followed by Ma Bin and Zhu Yuan. A moment later, in front of the heavenly spiral palace, Zhu Yuan was dumbfounded as he looked at the mere people walking around. He never thought that one day he would be able to see such a rare race. After all, according to the rumors, the mere people should have been extinct long ago. Although Ma Bin was surprised, he was still able to keep his composure. But when he learned that he was actually under the 10,000 elephant sea, his calmness turned into astonishment. He had never known that the 10,000 elephant sea was such a scene. Wan Xiao and Yan Miao came to greet him in person. Lu Yi had already greeted them before, so there was no need to say anything more. "Senior, please rest assured and recuperate here. This portal won't last long, so I have to hurry back. Our island is in contact with this place. If Senior needs anything, just let someone tell me and I will prepare it for Senior." Ma Bin looked at Lu Yi with a complicated expression. "You are so considerate." Back then, when Lu Yi learned about the recent situation in the 9 regions, he was gratified that his homeland still existed, but he never thought that he would have any intersection with his homeland. But he never thought that when he was most trapped and helpless, it was a junior from his homeland who solved his worries and solved his difficulties, and gave him the hope and possibility of making a comeback. "Senior, you are too polite." Lu Yi nodded and looked at Yan Miao and Wan Xiao. "I will have to trouble you here." "Don't worry." Yan Miao smiled and watched Lu Yi step into the portal and disappear again. After settling Ma Bin down, Lu Yi finally had one less worry. However, Ma Bin's injury was a wound to his Dao foundation. Although he could use the spirit jade vein, he was afraid that it wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. It should take a long time for him to recover. Lu Yi only needed to do one thing, and that was to cultivate. First, he would raise his cultivation to the peak of the Moon Jade realm. When his source origin was polished to perfection, he would be able to condense the flower of Qi and advance to the Sunshine realm. The precious blood avatar returned to the three-world island. Jiao Yan did not appear again, nor did she ask anything. It seemed that Ma Bin was right. Jiao Yan vaguely sensed something, but she could not make a specific judgment. That was why she asked Zhu Yuan to buy something and leave quickly. It was not that there was no sunshine in the Wanxiang Sea, but it would not stay for too long. A short break would not be a problem. Of course, the precondition was that when Wuxia from the Daluo galaxy escorted many cultivators here, he was immediately targeted by sunshine from the Daluo galaxy and summoned to talk to him. Even so, Wuxia did not stay in the Wanxiang Sea for too long. That time he seemed to have stayed in the Wanxiang Sea for less than a month. Time passed. Another year passed in the blink of an eye. Under the Wanxiang Sea, Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes. His cultivation had reached its limit. The improvement of the quality of his source origin had greatly increased his cultivation efficiency. That was why he could make such great gains in just 1 year. Generally speaking, when a Yu Yao reached his level, they would consider preparing to advance to sunshine. However, this barrier was not easy to break through. Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao in the past, He Baichuan, Yushi, Cheng Xian, and the others were all stuck at this barrier. In the universe, countless Yu Yao had failed to break through this barrier. The cultivation of the upper three realms was the cultivation of essence, energy, and spirit. Sunshine corresponded to spirit. Therefore, Yu Yao not only needed their cultivation to reach the standard, but also their divine sense to reach the standard. This was the fundamental reason why supreme-grade divine refining pills were so popular. Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao were able to advance smoothly largely because they had persisted in consuming supreme-grade divine refining pills all these years. However, the Yu Yao of the Daluo galaxy had such convenience. Other Yu Yao did not. They could only try their best to find some spirit pills or treasures that could improve their divine sense cultivation. However, if they ate too many spirit pills unless they were supreme grade, they would not benefit them. It was foreseeable that on the Daluo galaxy, He Baichuan and the others would have an easier time advancing to sunshine than the other Yu Yao. This was because they were currently being supplied with supreme grade divine refining pills. However, this did not mean that they would definitely advance. This was also related to their previous accumulation. However, on Lu Ye's side, a disappointed expression appeared on his face. This was because when Yu Yao's divine sense cultivation had reached its limit, he could clearly feel a layer of shackles binding his body. This layer was the biggest barrier for all Yu Yao. He felt that he only needed to exert a little force and he could break through. This was definitely not an illusion. It was the truth. In other words, if he wanted to advance to sunshine, he could do so now. This undoubtedly meant that this layer of shackles did not pose any hindrance to him. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, this was only natural. Back when he was cultivating in the 9 states, he was only at the true lake realm. However, he had already nurtured his soul avatar in Spirit Sea. Compared to ordinary cultivators, his divine sense had always been stronger. After that, he had obtained a rainbow divine lotus in the Soul Tribe's ancestral land. Since then, his divine sense had been constantly nourished and strengthened. So many years had passed. Even if he had not consumed any supreme-grade divine refining pills, the rainbow divine lotus was still much more useful than simply consuming spirit pills. The strength of his divine sense was enough to meet the requirements for advancing to sunshine. Once his divine sense was strong enough and his divine sense had accumulated enough cultivation, the shackles were no longer shackles. They could be easily broken through. However, Lu Yi naturally could not advance to sunshine just like that. If he had only wanted to increase his divine sense cultivation, he would have done so many years ago. All these years, he had been searching for resources to refine his divine sense cultivation. His various experiences in the Azura realm had brought him very close to success. If he gave up now, all his previous efforts would have been for naught. Thus, no matter what, he still had to condense the flower of Qi. Unfortunately, over the past year, even though the three-world island had increased the bounty on his head, he still had very little to show for it. So far, he had only obtained a single treasure that could refine one's divine sense cultivation. Lu Yi wanted to go to the Carriage Bell realm. Back then, he had obtained a spoil of war from Zixian. It was a treasure of this type. In the end, he had given it to Antyu. However, by the time he had found out, it was already too late. However, after thinking about it, he decided against it. Normally, Yu Yao would refine such a treasure as soon as she obtained it. Auntie was not someone who lacked spirit jades. She would not keep it. After all, it was something that he had given away. How could he take it back? Based on his current needs for such a treasure and his own judgment, if he could only obtain one each year, it would take him at least 20 to 30 years to achieve his goal. After returning from the sea, Lu Yi was depressed. Where should he go to find it? He could not help but think of the Azura realm. Mi Shi, the leader of the heavenly Azura tribe, had advanced too quickly. If he had advanced a year or two later, and if the Azura realm had closed a year or two later, he would not have been in such an awkward situation. This was the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where countless cultivators from different galaxies gathered. It could be said to be the center of the universe. If he could not find what he needed here, where could he find it? End of chapter. Chapter 1977. Just as he was feeling depressed, his expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly rushed off in a certain direction. He didn't know why Jiu Yan had summoned him. A moment later, inside the spirit jade mine, Lu Yi bowed. Greetings, senior. Jiu Yan was still cultivating, but she didn't make Lu Yi wait. Instead, she directly asked, "Have you considered the matter from last time?" What? Lu Yi was stunned. The matter from last time was about Zhu Yuan? However, he quickly realized that Jiu Yan was probably asking about accepting him as a disciple. He didn't know how to answer because he hadn't considered this matter at all. However, it wouldn't be good if he rejected her directly. "It seems you're unwilling." Jiu Yan snorted softly. She could already tell what he was thinking. Lu Yi apologized. "Senior, please forgive me. It's just that, no need to say anything more. Since you're unwilling, I won't force you," Jiu Yan interrupted him, seemingly a little annoyed. "On the other hand, your cultivation seems to have made significant progress." Lu Yi hurriedly said, "I've been cultivating in seclusion recently, and I've made some progress." Jiu Yan said, "Yu Yao and Ri Zhao are only one step apart, but in reality they're worlds apart. Once you cross over, you'll enter a whole new world. However, if you can't, you'll only be wasting your life away. You're currently at a critical juncture, so you must remember to guard against arrogance and rashness. Try not to fight with others and don't get injured easily." "Yes," Lu Yi replied. He suddenly felt that he might have misunderstood Jiu Yan. She didn't seem to hate him at all. Her words were clearly the concern of a senior toward a junior. "I heard that you're looking for treasures that can improve the quality of your art source?" Jiu Yan suddenly changed the topic. Three World Island had been sparing no effort in offering rewards for such treasures, so it was impossible for Jiu Yan not to have heard of them. "That's right." Lu Ye's expression changed. "Does senior have a way?" Jiu Yan didn't answer. She only said, "Of course, the higher the quality of your art source, the better. However, everyone has their own limits, so it's fine as long as your art source's quality is sufficient. There's no need to pursue it too much." Lu Yi naturally understood this principle. An art source's main function was to convert the spiritual energy that a cultivator refined into magic power during cultivation. It was something unique to Yu Yao. If a cultivator's efficiency in refining spiritual energy was limited, then no matter how high the grade of the source was, it would be meaningless, because there would not be enough spiritual energy to be converted. Therefore, it was fine as long as he had enough source energy, but Lu Yi didn't just want to have enough. He also wanted to polish his spiritual source to perfection. This wasn't something that he could tell Jiu Yan. He could only obediently say, "Junior understands." "It's good that you understand." As Jiu Yan spoke, she flicked her finger and an item flew over. Lu Yi instinctively grabbed it. However, before he could inspect it, Jiu Yan's voice rang out, "Go on. Cultivate well and break through as soon as possible." Lu Yi blinked, then bowed and left. Only after leaving the spirit jade mine and returning to his residence did Lu Yi have a chance to check what Jiu Yan had given him. It was a storage ring, but when Lu Yi checked the contents of the ring, he couldn't help being pleasantly surprised. This was because there were a total of 8 treasures in the ring that could temper the quality of one's source. According to the rules of the Azura field, these 8 treasures were worth at least an Azura seal. What did Jiu Yan mean by this? She had called him over to give him pointers and said that it was fine as long as his source energy was of sufficient quality. It was as if she was trying to persuade him not to waste his energy and time on this. However, she had also given him these 4 treasures. Lu Yi couldn't figure out what was going on. As a member of the Sunshine sect who had lived for who knew how many years, it was normal for her to have such treasures. But why would she give them to him? This was what Lu Yi couldn't understand. "And you should want them." Not to mention Aunt Yu Chushen had already advanced to Yu Yao. He also wanted them. Why would Zhou Yan give them to him? If it was because of Chushen, it didn't make sense for him to love the house and its crow. After thinking about it, Lu Yi felt that there was only one explanation. Whether it was Aunt Yu or Chushen, the quality of their source energy was sufficient. The treasures in Zhou Yan's hands were completely unnecessary. She also knew that he had asked the Three-World Island to put a bounty on such treasures, so she gave them to him. But no matter what, this gift from Zhou Yan was exactly what Lu Yi wanted. He silently remembered this favor in his heart. Now that the gap between their strength and status was too big, there was no need to talk about repayment. He would think about it in the future. After happily refining these treasures, Lu Yi keenly sensed that there were some unusual changes in his source energy. It was as if it wasn't too far away from reaching the Great Circle stage. He carefully sensed it and confirmed that it was not an illusion. His source energy was indeed not far from perfection. This made him pleasantly surprised. It seemed that his previous estimate was somewhat different from the actual situation. Based on the current situation, he only needed 2 or 3 more sets of treasures to complete the task. 2 or 3 treasures, it was really not much. If he was lucky, he might be able to achieve it in one day. Even if he was unlucky, there was still hope for him to achieve it in 2 or 3 years. Now that his cultivation was enough, and he had fulfilled all the requirements for breaking through to the Sunshine Sect, all that was left was to condense the qi refining flour. Lu Yi was in a good mood and was looking forward to it. On the island of Versatility, Yuan Du was guarding the palace. A gust of evil wind swept over, and He Yun revealed himself. Yuan Du sensed something and immediately came out to greet him. When he saw the figure in He Yun's hand, he nodded slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist, He Yun is quite fast. You caught her so quickly." He Yun threw the figure in his hand to the ground in front of him. "It's just catching Yu Yao. What's the trouble?" That being said, this Yu Yao was not someone he had casually caught. At this moment, Yu Yao was lying on the ground with a slender figure. Her exposed skin was blood red, and her 2 pointy ears indicated that she was a blood tribe member. At this moment, this blood tribe member Yu Yao had been sealed by He Yun and couldn't move at all. Her face was full of fear and uneasiness. "So what do we do next?" He Yun asked Yuan Du with a gloomy expression. Not only had Zixian suffered heavy losses, but he had also listened to Yuan Du's nonsense and made a trip to the 9 states. In the end, even the avatar he had spent 3,000 years to create had died there. How could he not take revenge for such a great grudge? Moreover, unlike Yuan Du, he had recognized the 9 states and was still thinking about the supreme treasure of the starry sky, the Tao Tree. His avatar hadn't found any traces of the Tao Tree in the 9 states. In addition, he had previously inquired about Lu Yi, so he boldly speculated that this Lu Yi might have obtained the inheritance of the Tao Tree. Otherwise, how could his cultivation have improved so quickly? This was a very suspicious point. Since it was suspicious, he couldn't let it go. With this speculation, he naturally came to the 10,000 Elephant Sea to take down Lu Yi. In this regard, he and Yuan Du were like-minded. The only difference was that Yuan Du was purely venting his anger for the sake of his own dignity, but he had other motives. He had no choice but to join forces with Yuan Du if he wanted to take down Lu Yi in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. He couldn't avoid the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. Therefore, he could only cooperate with Yuan Du. With Yuan Du's help, the resistance would be much lower. He didn't have any other requests. He only wanted Lu Yi to be handed over to him. He told Yuan Du that he wanted to avenge the dead Zixian demon cultivator and bring him back to the Zixian demon planet to sacrifice to the demon god. Yuan Du didn't suspect anything and immediately agreed. In any case, as long as he could take down the Three-World Island and the passage to the Mermaid Clan's territory, there was no harm in handing Lu Yi over to He Yun. He believed that He Yun wouldn't let Lu Yi live. Moreover, Zixian had indeed suffered great losses because of him. Yuan Du knew that if he wanted to maintain his relationship with Zixian, he couldn't refuse He Yun's small request. Both of them had their own motives, so of course they hit it off. Moreover, from their point of view, the 2 Rikus joining forces to plot against Yu Yao and the top-grade spiritual island behind her was like pinching a conch with 10 fingers. No accidents would happen. Half a year ago, He Yun came once and reached a verbal agreement with Yuan Du. Then, Yuan Du asked him to capture a member of the blood tribe. He Yun didn't know why, but since it was a cooperation, he didn't refuse. He had also worked hard to capture Yu Yao in the blood tribe's domain. Because of this, he had been hunted down by a few Rikus for a month. Next, we just need to wait. Yuan Du smiled slightly as if victory was already in his hands. As long as Zhou Yan left the Three-World Island, then he could act without worry. Jiao Yan's presence there made him wary. As for how to get Jiao Yan to leave the three-world island, he had already planned for a long time. He believed that in a few days the news would reach Jiao Yan's ears. Days passed by. On this day in the three-world island's garrison area, a group of people sat cross-legged in front of Lu Ye's bamboo house. They surrounded him in the middle. Lu Yi couldn't raise his cultivation level, and he couldn't find any treasures to improve the quality of his spiritual power source. He seemed to have nothing to do. He wasn't willing to participate in the management of the three-world island, so he simply spread the news that anyone who had any questions about cultivation could ask him at any time. His original intention was to help the island's cultivators solve some of their problems and help them grow better. However, after the news was spread, many people came to him every day to ask for help. Gradually, more and more people gathered, and gradually, it became the current scale. Not only people from the Qingli Dao world and the Yukon world came to look for him, many seniors from the 9 states came as well. Even the sect master came to ask him a few questions. Lu Yi answered all of their questions carefully, and many cultivators learned a lot. While it was bustling here, Lu Ye's expression suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked in a direction with a puzzled expression. Half a day later the crowd dispersed. Lu Yi went to look for Chu Shen. Why did Senior Jiao Yan suddenly leave? He clearly felt Jiao Yan's aura flash past. She should have left the three-world island. End of chapter. Chapter 1978. Jiao Yan didn't tell Lu Yi anything before she left, so there was no reason for her to tell him. Therefore he came to Chu Shen's place to ask. Perhaps Chu Shen would know something. Sure enough, Chu Shen knew the situation. Mother said an old friend called her and asked her to go to another galaxy to help. She'll be back soon. I see. Lu Yi understood. Jiao Yan was visiting a friend. However, as Rizhao, it was normal to have friends from other galaxies. Even Lu Yi himself knew many people from other galaxies. Therefore Lu Yi didn't think too much about it. After chatting with Chu Shen for a while he left. But for some reason as Jiao Yan left, Lu Yi suddenly had a feeling of unease, as if something bad was about to happen. This feeling made him secretly vigilant. When one's cultivation had reached such a level, sometimes the sudden inspiration might be a kind of omen. In the bamboo building Lu Yi thought about it for a long time, but he did not find anything wrong or worthy of attention. This was the Myriad Sea. As long as the rules of the Myriad Sea were not broken, then with the foundation of the three-world island and the reputation he had gained through killing, he could rest easy. After thinking for a long time, he reached into his pocket and took out the dice of fate. He was proud of this thing. He had only rolled it once. The other times were when he entered various training scenarios and the dice of fate appeared on its own. However, based on his previous experiences, the dice of fate lived up to its name. The divinations it rolled were closely related to his future situation to a large extent. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that it wasn't the dice of fate that controlled his fate, but the future's misfortune. If it weren't for the palpitations this time, he wouldn't have used it so casually. However, he couldn't care too much at this moment. After thinking for a while, he threw the dice in front of him. With a rumble, the small die froze. A dim light flashed and turned into the word, How. Before Lu Yi could take a closer look, the word How turned into a dim light again and entered his forehead. Lu Yi frowned. This How was obviously not a good sign. This undoubtedly showed that his palpitations weren't for no reason. Something could really happen. However, since it was How and not a misfortune, then it didn't seem to be a big deal. Or perhaps it was not too dangerous, but the process might be a little bumpy? But no matter what, this made Lu Yi cautious. After thinking for a while, he got up and walked towards the pill room. He found Second Senior Sister and talked to her. Second Senior Sister didn't ask anything and just nodded repeatedly. After leaving Second Senior Sister's place, Lu Yi checked the talent tree. Under the illumination of the flames, a gray mist rose. It was obvious that the mysterious power of the dice of fate was being burned away by the talent tree. At this rate, it would be completely burned away in less than 2 or 3 days. He calmed down a little. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. On this day, Lu Yi was answering the questions of some cultivators when he suddenly felt a brilliant aura rapidly approaching from a certain direction. He hurriedly raised his head to look in that direction and frowned. His sudden impulse had really come true, but what he hadn't expected was that it would actually be that old bastard Yuan Du. Moreover, it happened to be less than 2 days after Jiao Yan left. Was this a coincidence? Lu Yi didn't think so. He wasn't the only one who felt the radiant aura. Many of the Yu Yao on the island also felt it. Immediately, Divine thoughts were transmitted from all over the island. After a brief exchange, Lu Yi got up and headed in Yuandu's direction. At the same time, following his order, the defensive formation of the entire three-world island was activated to the extreme. Yuandu had come personally, so it was obvious that he didn't come with good intentions. There were some things that he had to guard against. A moment later, inside the defensive formation, Lu Yi and the other island lords gathered behind him. They stood in the air and looked in the direction Yuandu had come from. This old bastard didn't hide his radiant aura at all, but his speed wasn't fast. In fact, it could even be said that he was very slow. Therefore, along the way he attracted the attention of countless cultivators. They didn't know what Yuandu was doing. However, when they realized that Yuandu was actually heading towards the famous three-world island, many cultivators showed interest and followed him from afar. Many cultivators knew about the grudge between the three-world island and Yuandu. However, as the protector of the 10,000 creation sea, Yuandu had to strictly abide by the rules of the 10,000 creation sea. Therefore, even if he was radiant, he couldn't do anything to the three-world island as long as they didn't violate any rules. Now that Yuandu had suddenly pointed his sword at the three-world island, it was obvious that he was going to make a big move. Naturally, it made people curious. Junior brother Lu, this old bastard doesn't have good intentions. Baichuan's face was full of worry. Of course, he understood Yuandu's intentions. As radiant, he could have come quickly, but he chose to walk so slowly. He deliberately attracted attention and made people follow him. This was to create momentum. On one hand, it was to put pressure on the three-world island. On the other hand, it was to show others that he was fair and just. He had absolute confidence in himself. Therefore, no matter what he did, he would do it according to the rules of the 10,000 creation sea. No one would criticize him. News spread quickly in the 10,000 creation sea, especially regarding Radiant and the three-world island. Therefore, in just a moment, the entire 10,000 creation sea knew about what was going on here. Those close to the three-world island hurried over to take a look, while those far away also hurried over. Everyone realized that something big might happen today. The journey that should have taken only a dozen breaths took Yuandu an incense stick's worth of time. When Yuandu arrived at the three-world island, there was already a sea of people in all directions. Yuandu didn't come alone. He had brought nearly 100 Yuyao with him. Some of these Yuyao belonged to the local star system's domain and were directly under Yuandu's command. However, most of them were the guards of the major spiritual islands. For example, Lu Yi saw Giant Blade Island's Zhao Yunqi, the island master of Giant Blade Island, who had been taken advantage of twice by the three-world island, couldn't help but shrink his neck when he met Lu Ye's eyes. He was traumatized. This time he didn't want to get involved in the matter against the three-world island. However, since Yuandu had summoned him, he had to come. On the surface, it seemed that the three-world island had no power to resist since Yuandu had personally come. However, Zhao Yunqi still felt uneasy. He had a feeling that things wouldn't go so smoothly. If Yuandu failed, the Giant Blade Island would no longer have the qualifications to establish itself in the 10,000 creation sea. Although he knew that this was unlikely to happen, he was still worried. Zhao Yunqi wasn't the only Yu Yao guard summoned by Yuandu. There were a few other Yao cultivators who were obviously on Zixian's side. However, they were all new Yao cultivators, so Lu Yi didn't know any of them. As for the other Yu Yao, Lu Yi didn't know any of them either. As the Rizhao Realm's guard, he had the right to summon the Yu Yao of the major spiritual islands to help him when he encountered some problems. Yuandu had taken action this time to make a big deal out of this matter. He wanted to let the world know that he wasn't seeking personal revenge, but was standing on the side of righteousness. On one side, Rizhao had come in person with 100 Yu Yao cultivators following him. On the other side, there was only Lu Yi and a few others. The two sides were separated by a defensive formation and were less than 100 feet apart. Lu Yi looked at Yuandu and said calmly, "What a powerful aura. I didn't know who had such a powerful aura. It turns out that it's guard Yuandu who has come in person. I apologize for not going out to meet you. May I know the reason for your visit?" Yuandu only looked at him indifferently. Due to the angle, he seemed to be looking down at him from above. He didn't respond to Lu Ye's question at all. Obviously, he didn't think Lu Yi was qualified to talk to him. Beside him, Yuan Qing stepped forward and smiled at Lu Yi. "Island Master Lu, we meet again." Back then he had seen with his own eyes how Lu Yi killed Lionheart. His heart had palpitated for a long time. Lu Yi gave him a feeling of lawlessness. He even dared to offend Yuandu. Yuan Qing didn't get along well with Lu Yi. If Lu Yi wanted to kill him one day, how could he stop him? However, from today onwards he didn't have to worry about anything. Yuan Qingzhen didn't know what Lu Yi was thinking. Was there a hole in his brain? How dare he offend Ri Zhao when he was trying to make a living on the Vientiane Sea? Yuan Qingzhen didn't know what Lu Yi was thinking. Fellow Taoist Yuan Cheng. Lu Yi turned to look at him. Yuan Qing nodded and his expression turned serious. Island Master Lu, Lord Guard has come for an important matter. Therefore, I would like to ask Island Master Lu to open the defensive formation and let us in first. The defensive formation. Lu Yi tilted his head. That's unfortunate. A few days ago the island's formation suddenly ran into some problems and can't be opened for the time being. Lord Guard, if you have something to say you can say it here. In the face of Zhao Ri, the defensive formation might be a layer of protection, but how could Lu Yi casually open the formation to let others in? If he did, and the other party harbored ill intentions, Yuan Cheng would be powerless to resist. Moreover, from the other party's attitude, it was obvious he wasn't here to talk to him. The defensive formation can't be opened. Yuan Cheng's eyes twitched. He really didn't understand how Lu Yi could be so thick-skinned as to lie through his teeth. However, before he could say anything, Lu Yi said, "Or is there something the Lord Guard doesn't want to tell outsiders?" It was obvious that he was worried about Yuan Du and wanted to secretly play some tricks. Yuan Cheng smiled. Of course not. That's good. It's rare for so many fellow Taoists to gather here today, so there are some things that need to be revealed in public and let everyone know the true face of some people. It was expected that the three-world island would close the formation, so Yuan Qing didn't care at all. As long as this matter was confirmed, the three-world island and Lu Yi would never be able to rise again. Bring him in. Yuan Qing suddenly waved his hand. In the next moment, Tu Yuyao escorted a figure to the front. Countless gazes gathered on the figure and soon cries of surprise rang out. Blood race. It's the blood race. Why did they bring a blood race member here? Could it be? Many people knew that there were blood race members hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, the blood race members were very well hidden. Even Zhao Ri couldn't detect them unless he was at close range. Moreover, there weren't many blood race members hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and they hadn't stirred up much trouble. Most of them just quietly cultivated and collected some information. It was harmless, so no one paid them much attention. However, at this moment, a blood race member had been brought in to face the three-world island, even though Yuan Du had personally appeared. This inevitably caused many people to wonder. End of chapter. Chapter 1979. This blood clan member had obviously been tortured. His aura was weak and his face was very pale. The insect and blood clans were hated by everyone in the galaxy. It would be fine if he didn't expose himself under normal circumstances, but in this situation he knew that he would die without a doubt, so he had no intention of resisting at all. The 10,000 Elephant Sea naturally had their reasons for sparing his life. He only needed to cooperate a little later and he would have a quick death. Under everyone's gaze, Yuan Qing pointed at this blood clan member and explained with a smile, "This bastard has been hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea for many years with evil intentions. A few days ago the Lord Guardian discovered some clues and captured him. In fact, this blood clan member's origin was captured by He Yun from a blood clan realm, but outsiders didn't know, so Yuan Qing naturally explained. The Lord Guardian asked around and found out that there is more than one blood clan member hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It's just that these blood clan members are proficient in the art of concealment and transformation, so ordinary people can't detect them." Many people nodded at his words. This was something that everyone knew, so they weren't surprised. Yuan Cheng's expression turned serious. The insect and blood clans are the most chaotic in the galaxy. The 10,000 Elephant Sea is the gathering place of various galaxies, the center of the galaxy. How can the blood clan be allowed to do as they please here? Unfortunately, ordinary methods can't find these hidden blood clan members, but just because ordinary methods can't find them doesn't mean the blood clan can't find them themselves. At this point, he turned to look at the blood clan member with a cold expression. "Don't you think so?" The blood clan member immediately understood that it was time for him to cooperate. He didn't resist and said with a wooden expression, "That's right. My clan has a secret technique called the blood cry technique. When used, I can sense the presence of my clan members nearby." Right now, he only wanted to die quickly, so he was willing to cooperate with Yuan Du when the time came. He would choose the targets according to the agreement. The ones who died were humans anyway, so it wouldn't hurt him or the blood clan at all. In fact, he was quite happy to see the human race fight like this. It made him feel good to drag someone down with him before he died. The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. Yuan Du's side had rushed to the three-world island with a blood clan member. More importantly, this blood clan member had said such words, which made the original fanciful thoughts become more and more suspicious. Could it be that the three-world island that had risen to fame in recent years? Island Master Lu, Yuan Cheng looked at Lu Yi with a smile. I wonder if Island Master Lu has anything to say? Lu Ye's expression was calm. What do you want me to say? Yuan Cheng was a little disappointed. He had thought that he would see Lu Ye's flustered look. Who would have thought that this guy's temperament would be so calm? At this point, Yuan Du's purpose in bringing a blood clan member here was obvious. He wanted to identify Lu Yi as a blood clan member. However, both Yuan Du and Yuan Cheng knew that this was obviously a false accusation, but so what? As long as this blood clan member pointed out Lu Yi, they would have a reason to attack. When that time came, the three-world island wouldn't compromise. If the three-world island dared to resist, they would be accused. When Yuan Du attacked, no one would say anything. This was an overt scheme, and it was an overt scheme that couldn't be broken in the face of absolute strength. It was true that the Rizhao Guard wouldn't interfere in the battles between the major spiritual islands, but killing a blood clan member wasn't a problem. That was why Yuan Du wanted to find a way to get Jiao Yan away. Otherwise, as long as she was on the three-world island, this plan couldn't be carried out. If that was the case and Jiao Yan came to confront him personally, how could he defend himself? Jiao Yan's temper wasn't good. If she came back and attacked him directly, he would have a bump on his head. Now that Jiao Yan wasn't here and the other guards didn't come out, he, Yuan Du, was the only one on the Vientiane Sea. Since Island Master Lu has nothing to say, then I'll say it. Yuan Cheng was still smiling. I've seen Island Master Lu fight from afar. Actually, I'm very curious about one thing. Since Island Master Lu is a weapon cultivator, how did you manage to cultivate such an exquisite blood Dao technique? Without giving Lu Yi a chance to speak, he raised his voice. Regardless of whether it was the battle against Bai Yu or the attack on Zixian a few years ago, Island Master Lu's Blood Sea technique was amazing. That level of Blood Sea technique isn't like any other secret technique of the Blood Dao. It shouldn't be cultivated by a weapon cultivator. It would have been better if he didn't say this. Once he said this, many cultivators around frowned and fell into deep thought. Regardless of whether it was the battle against Bai Yu or Zixian, there were too many spectators. Lu Ye's Blood Sea technique was indeed impressive. Now that they thought about it, there seemed to be something wrong. Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was known as the #1 person under the Rizhao Guard. It was because he was a weapon cultivator that he killed his way through. After all, a person's energy was limited. Even those Dharma cultivators who specialized in Blood Dao secret techniques might not be able to display such a level of Blood Sea technique. However, a weapon cultivator was able to do it. This was indeed abnormal. Lu Yi blinked. It's true that I'm a weapon cultivator, but I'm also a Dharma cultivator. Body cultivator. Sword cultivator. What's the problem? Yuan Cheng was stunned by his words. I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Don't waste your breath on him. Yuan Du impatiently urged. If it weren't for the righteous side, he wouldn't have created such a troublesome situation. However, if the Rizhao Guard personally made a move, he would have a good reason to do so. Therefore, there were some things that needed to be done. Yuan Cheng's expression turned serious. He looked at Lu Yi coldly. You're a weapon cultivator, but you can display such a Blood Dao secret technique. There's only one reason. Island Master Lu, do we have to be so clear? Lu Yi said, if you can explain it clearly, then go ahead. I'm all ears. As he argued with Yuan Cheng, his divine consciousness surged. In the Three-World Island, in the pill room, Second Senior Sister had already blown the Blue Sea conch. The cultivators of the Three-World Island were retreating to the Mermaid Clan's territory. Since a few days ago, when Lu Yi felt uneasy, he had a premonition that something was about to happen. Since that was the case, he had already made arrangements. Right now, the most precious thing on the Three-World Island was naturally the cultivators on the island. Therefore, as long as the cultivators on the island were evacuated, it wouldn't be a big deal even if the Three-World Island was lost. This time, Yuan Du obviously wouldn't let the matter rest. Lu Ye's fist was not as big as his, so he didn't want to fight him head-on. It wouldn't be too late to wait for Jiao Yan to return and ask her to solve the problem. Yuan Cheng was rambling on and on, so he was happy to stall for time. Yuan Cheng looked at him deeply. As you wish. After that, he looked at the Blood Clan cultivator and ordered, find your clansman. The Blood Clan cultivator didn't say a word and immediately activated the Blood Cry technique. When the real Blood Cry technique was activated, it was actually silent. The user could easily sense the presence of their clansmen nearby. However, Yuan Du had warned him before coming here. Therefore, the blood cry technique he used now was a little different. Under everyone's gaze, the blood clan cultivator's chi and blood surged. Immediately, a bloodline stretched out from his body. It wriggled like a living creature and slowly extended towards Lu Yi. This bloodline was completely useless. Its main purpose was to make it easier for outsiders to observe. It was a direct way to let the crowd know that Lu Yi was a blood clan cultivator. Seeing the bloodline pointing at Lu Yi, the cultivators who didn't know the truth immediately exclaimed in surprise. Yuan Cheng's face was filled with pride. After today there would be no more Three-World Island and no more Lu Yi in the Wanxiang Sea. According to the plan, the blood clan cultivator would identify Lu Yi next. But just as Yuan Cheng was looking forward to it, the blood clan cultivator suddenly revealed an extremely shocked expression. He stared blankly at Lu Yi and then at Ma Shangxi beside Lu Yi. He had indeed used despicable means to frame the young man in front of him according to Yuan Du's instructions. However, he had also secretly activated the real blood cry technique at the same time. In the end, he was shocked to find that the young man he was going to frame was actually one of his clansmen. He had the blood of the blood clan in his body, and it seemed to be very pure. Not only him, but the other person standing behind him also had the same, and there seemed to be traces of a third blood clan cultivator on the island. This Three-World Island was a spiritual island occupied by a powerhouse of his clan? The captured blood clan cultivator was shocked. He had never expected such a ridiculous thing to happen. He met Lu Ye's gaze and saw that the other's gaze was leisurely and seemed to be hiding something. Many thoughts flashed through the captured blood clan cultivator's mind. His clan was suffering. Just like the insect clan, everyone in the starry sky wanted to beat them up. In this vast and bustling Wanxiang Sea, every clan had the right to have a share of the pie, except for the insect clan and the blood clan. Even if the blood clan came, they would have to find ways to conceal themselves and hide their true selves in the dark. Who would have thought that a top-grade spiritual island had been occupied by a powerhouse of his clan? If he caused the other party to be exposed this time, wouldn't he be the sinner of his entire clan? He had long been prepared to die. Death was nothing to be regretted, but he definitely couldn't harm his clansmen. Now that his clan had occupied a top-grade spiritual island in the Wanxiang Sea, he would have the opportunity to start a prairie fire in the future. Therefore he made a prompt decision. The bloodline that was supposed to extend toward Lu Yi turned in front of Lu Yi and landed directly on Yuan Cheng, who was looking forward to it. Yuan Cheng was stunned and turned to look at the captured blood clan cultivator. The blood clan cultivator had an excited expression and shouted, "So fellow cultivator Yuan Cheng is actually a member of our clan. You hit it so well." The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar and exclaimed continuously. Yuan Cheng was dumbfounded. He looked at the captured blood clan cultivator in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about? Things shouldn't have developed this way. According to the original plan, the blood clan cultivator should have identified Lu Yi and he should have stepped forward to question him. Once the blood clan cultivator identified him, it wouldn't matter whether Lu Yi admitted it or not. But what was the situation with this blood clan cultivator now? Why was he lying through his teeth and framing him instead? How could he not know whether he was a blood clan cultivator? How could he be a blood clan cultivator? Moreover, they had clearly agreed on this beforehand. Inside the protective array, Lu Yi looked at the farce in front of him and thought, so this is the true meaning of the word error? Sure enough, there was no danger and no big deal. End of chapter. Chapter 1980. Lu Yi knew what Yuan Du was up to when he saw him bring a blood descendant. He was surprised by the blood descendant's betrayal, but he could guess the reason. The blood descendant must have used the blood cry technique and sensed his and Ma Shangxi's blood descendant's bloodline. From the blood descendant's point of view, he would never harm his own people. That was why he framed Yuan Cheng. This was the reason for the awkward situation. Yuan Cheng scolded the blood descendant with an innocent and angry face. The blood descendant was not afraid at all. He was going to die anyway. He could help his people hide better before he died. Yuan Du frowned and looked at the blood descendant. If his original plan was to frame Lu Yi through this blood descendant, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. The blood descendant's behavior was no doubt a cover-up. What was he hiding? Why didn't he follow his orders? He couldn't say that Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was really. Yuan Du's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have discovered a shocking secret. But he quickly reacted. If the blood descendant did not identify Lu Yi, then what was he doing here? As the guardian of the Sunshine State, he could not do anything to the three-world island without any evidence. Otherwise he would be breaking the rules. Especially this time, in order to show off his impartiality, he had purposely attracted so many cultivators to come and watch. This time he had really shot himself in the foot. For the first time, Yuan Du felt that his identity as a guardian was a restriction. Suddenly, a fierce magical power surged. Yuan Du was shocked. He quickly turned around and shouted, "No!" However, how could the person who activated the dermic powers pay any attention to him? A figure charged out and punched the air. With this punch, the Blood Clan member who was tangled up with Yuan Cheng was blasted to smithereens. The power of the punch did not diminish at all as it slammed into the protective array of the three-world island. Visible shockwaves rippled out from the point of contact. The entire three-world island shook violently. "I told you to just do it. Why did you have to do all this nonsense? What a waste of time." Inside the defensive formation, Lu Yi looked at the figure in disbelief. "Hey Yun. Isn't this guy dead? More than a year ago he was surrounded and killed by a few Rizhao from Mount Fangsuan. How could he appear here?" However, the other party's appearance and temperament were clearly that of the dead Black Cloud demon Venerable. Moreover, based on his impression, the Black Cloud in front of him seemed to be much stronger than the one he had seen before. He Yun stared coldly at Lu Yi through the protective array. He sent a telepathic message to Lu Yi, "Kid, if you don't want anything to happen to Jojo, you'd better surrender yourself." Lu Yi frowned. "What did you do?" He Yun snorted coldly, "Nothing much." At this moment, 2 great demon venerables and 8 lesser demon venerables, a total of 10 demon venerables, have joined forces to lead an army to the 9 states. They will arrive in 3 months. Ever since his Dharmakaya had fallen into the hands of the 9 states, He Yun had been thinking about revenge all the time. However, according to his speculation, Lu Yi had most likely obtained the inheritance of the Dao tree. Therefore, when he asked Zixian's army to move out, he himself came to the Wanxiang Sea and decided to take down Lu Yi personally. Attacking the 9 states was a safety measure. Because the inheritance of the Dao tree was only his speculation, he could not be sure. Therefore, the best plan was to take down Lu Yi in the three-world island while taking down the 9 states. Then, no matter where the inheritance of the Dao tree was, it would not be out of his control. He knew that there were strong cultivators in Jojo. Otherwise, his Dharmakaya would not have fallen. However, no matter how strong they were, Zixian's 10 Rizhao were mobilizing together, leading tens of thousands of troops. It was impossible that they could not take down Jojo. Calculating the time, Zixian's army should be halfway there. After he took down Lu Yi, he would even have time to join Zixian's army and personally preside over the battle to see who had destroyed his Dharmakaya. Lu Yi's expression changed. Although there were several Rizhao from Mount Fangsuan in Jojo, Zixian's force was too strong. Mount Fangsuan alone was unable to contend with Zixian, unless the south and west also came to help. Even so, they could only contend with Zixian in the Rizhao level. When the battle started, the people of Jojo would be plunged into misery and suffering. Seeing the anger in Lu Yi's eyes, He Yun transmitted a message. "Of course, if you are willing to surrender and answer a few questions, I will immediately call back Zixian's army." Of course this was a lie. Zixian's army had already been mobilized. Even if he was one of the 5 great monster lords, he could not interfere with the army's progress. He only said this to make it easier to take down Lu Yi. He could feel that Yuan Du had ulterior motives. However, in his opinion, Yuan Du was after the three-world island itself, while he wanted Lu Yi and the cultivators of the three-world island. Therefore their demands did not conflict. "You are courting death." Lu Yi looked at him coldly. He Yun snorted, "No one has dared to speak to me like this for many years." The exchange of divine thoughts between the two only lasted for a moment, but this unforeseen event shocked all the onlookers. No one expected Rizhao to suddenly appear from behind Yuan Du at this time and attack so brazenly. Moreover, Rizhao's aura was obviously unusual. He is a monster lord of the monster clan. Someone with good eyesight recognized He Yun's origin at a glance. Monster clan? So he should be the monster lord of Zixian. Is it Monster Lord He Yun? I remember seeing him once from afar when I was young. A monster lord attacking for no reason is against the rules. Didn't the guardians do anything? While the cultivators were discussing, 4 figures gathered in front of the guardian palace on the island of all manifestations, looking in the direction of the three-world island. These 4 people were none other than Yuan Du, the other 4 guardians of the palace. Gu Shi of the Tianyin realm, Mu Qing of the Kunyu realm, Mo Wenli of the Illusion God realm, and Qin Xuanba of the Gaotian continent. Including the Yuan realm where Yuandu came from, these realms were basically the most powerful in the entire Wanxiang galaxy. What is senior brother Yuandu doing? Mu Qing frowned. As guardians of the Rizhao realm, Yuandu had been planning something recently. Of course they knew about it. Before Yuandu left this time, he had informed them and promised that no matter what he did, he would not break the rules of the Wanxiang Sea. But now it seemed that Yuandu's promise was bullshit. The outsider Rizhao had already made his move here. If this matter was not resolved properly, it would greatly damage the prestige and reputation of the Rizhao realm. It might even lead to a series of turmoil. Should we go and take a look? Mo Wenli asked. What can we do if we see? Qin Xuanba shook his head slowly. Do we help or stop them? If they helped, the reputation that the Wanxiang Sea had built up over the years would be gone in an instant. But if they stopped them, they would only be seen as a joke by outsiders. So, no matter what choice they made, they could only wait and see. They could only wait for Yuandu to settle this matter so that the Wanxiang Sea's interest would not be damaged too badly. It's the Three-World Island again. They are indeed restless. Gu Shi snorted coldly. His words seemed to be criticizing the Three-World Island. The other Rizhao realm experts knew very well, Gu Shi had always looked down on the Three-World Island. It was not because of his deep friendship with Yuandu, but because the unparalleled island had been taken by the Tianyin realm behind him. In the end, the unparalleled island had fallen and the Three-World Island had risen. Gu Shi had always felt that the Three-World Island had stolen the fate of the unparalleled island. That was why the situation of one spiritual island falling and the other rising was happening. If the Three-World Island did not exist, the Matchless Island might still be as prosperous as it was now. It could bring great benefits to the Tianyin realm. But today, how many people in the Wanxiang Sea still remembered the Matchless Island? He was happy to see Yuandu attack the Three-World Island. Maybe after Yuandu took over the Three-World Island, the Matchless Island that belonged to the Tianyin realm would have a chance to revive. At this time, outside the Three-World Island, He Yun brazenly attacked. Yuandu couldn't stop him in time. Many doubts flashed through his mind. He immediately shouted, "This blood race would rather die to frame me. Luye, you are indeed from the blood race. Show your true form." That blood kindred's previous actions were too strange. It was impossible for him to believe that Yuan Cheng was a blood kindred, because Yuan Cheng was his junior in the Yuan world. Others might not know whether Yuan Cheng was a blood kindred or not, but how could he not know? But the other party had clearly made such a decision in advance. He was undoubtedly covering up for Luye. Yuandu was 80% sure that Luye was from the blood race. He didn't have evidence, but it didn't matter. He would first pin this big accusation on Luye, and then he would have the right to do so. Although the process was not satisfactory, it was fine as long as the direction of the matter was not out of his control. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Luye coldly snorted. After the insect and blood race suffered a great loss at the reincarnation tree's alpha origin stage, they jointly issued a huge reward for me. I believe many people have heard of the name Luye from the Nine Heavens. How can I be from the blood race? Yuandu was taken aback. Yes, if Luye was from the blood race, then what was the matter with the reward? There were many people who had the same doubts as him. Many people knew about the reward issued by the insect and blood race back then, and also knew that the person on the bounty was Luye from the Nine Heavens. However, very few people knew that Luye from the Nine Heavens was actually Luye from the Three-World Island. Now that he said it out loud, it naturally became a means to prove his innocence. Fortunately, He Yun's brain worked quickly. He knew that he shouldn't be entangled with Luye at this time and should quickly take him down. He immediately sneered, "I have naturally heard of Luye from the Nine Heavens, but are you really from the Nine Heavens? You are clearly from the Nine Heavens." He was certain that Luye wouldn't dare to answer this question. As expected, Luye immediately shut his mouth. While the two were exchanging words, He Yun's subordinates didn't stop. After a few punches, the entire Three-World Island was thrown into turmoil, and the defensive formation that had been accumulated for many years was on the verge of collapse. This was the power of sunlight. Let alone the defensive formation of the Three-World Island, even Zixian's defensive formation couldn't withstand such an attack. In comparison, Zixian's defensive formation was much stronger than the Three-World Islands. End of this chapter. Chapter 1981. When he sensed Yuandu's arrival, Luye had already pushed the power of the island's protective array to its limit, consuming the spiritual energy it had accumulated over the years. If not for this, He Yun would have been able to break the array in 2 or 3 strikes. Even at this moment, the array wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Lu Yi could clearly see the array's light curtain dimming at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even small cracks flashed across its surface. This was clearly the result of the array withstanding an attack that exceeded its limits. Lu Yi frowned and sent a divine sense message to He Baichuan and the others beside him, "Go!" Yuan Du and He Yun had come with such ferocity this time that it was impossible for them to give up. Once the array was broken, everyone would become fish on the chopping block. Therefore they had to evacuate Three World Island before the array was broken. Receiving his orders, He Baichuan and the others didn't hesitate at all, turning around and flying down, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Over at the pill room, the door leading to the merfolk territory was wide open, and all the cultivators on Three World Island were nervously evacuating in an orderly manner. However, there were many cultivators and the door was only so big, so it would still take some time for them to evacuate. Lu Yi estimated that before the array was broken, all the cultivators on the island wouldn't be able to evacuate in time. He still had to use the red talisman. Thinking so, Lu Yi no longer hesitated, his body releasing a bright red light as his aura rose rapidly. Red talisman? Yuan Du had been watching Lu Ye's movements closely. He had seen the scene of He Baichuan and the others leaving just now and could roughly guess where they were going, but he didn't care. All he wanted was to keep an eye on Lu Yi. In other words, as long as Lu Yi was still here, no one else mattered. Once he captured Lu Yi, the entire Three World Island and even the merfolk territory would be his. But at this moment, when Lu Yi activated an unknown red talisman, Yuan Du was surprised. He knew that Lu Yi seemed to have a good relationship with the humanoid race, but he didn't expect it to be so good that he even had a red talisman. Just as he was thinking about what type of red talisman this was and what kind of power it would erupt with, Lu Yi suddenly shouted, "Combine!" As his voice echoed, the red light shot into the Three World Island's defensive formation and fused with it. In an instant, the entire defensive formation turned red. From afar, it looked like the cultivators of the Three World Island were covered in a layer of blood. The defensive formation that was on the verge of collapse under the onslaught of the black clouds suddenly became much more solid. "You're kind-hearted, aren't you?" Yuan Du looked at Lu Yi, having already seen through the power of the red talisman. It was clearly a red talisman used for protection, but Lu Yi didn't use it on himself. Instead, he used it on the defensive formation to increase its strength. This was clearly to buy time for the other cultivators to escape. But there was no point in doing so. "What nonsense are you spouting? What are you waiting for?" He Yun shouted in a low voice. From the moment he attacked until now, Yuan Du had actually been watching with the cold eyes of a bystander and even had the mood to criticize Lu Ye's actions. He Yun simply didn't know what Yuan Du was thinking. Didn't he know the principle of long delays being fraught with problems? The defensive formation here was about to be broken, but with the support of Lu Ye's red talisman, it was able to struggle at death's door for a while. If Yuan Du had attacked with him earlier, Lu Yi would have been captured by now. This undoubtedly displeased He Yun. As soon as He Yun finished speaking, Yuan Du took a step forward. Even at this time he didn't forget to shout, "Lu Yi of the Blood Tribe, hiding in the Myriad Sea and occupying the Three World Island. You harbor evil intentions. Today this guardian will take you down and enforce justice on behalf of the heavens." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and pointed forward. This silent attack caused the barrier of light strengthened by the red talisman to tremble violently. Lu Yi couldn't help but take a few steps back. With two great suns attacking at the same time, the defensive formation wouldn't even last 5 breaths. It was time to evacuate. He didn't run toward the pill room because it was a bit far away. Moreover, the Azure Sea Snail's door could only be opened for a limited time. There was no aura left over there, so Lu Yi didn't know if the door had closed or not. If the door was already closed by the time he got there, he would have no tears to cry. Thus he quickly arrived at the edge of a cliff. Below him was the pitch-black Myriad Sea. He had never worried about encountering too much danger on the Myriad Sea because he had an ability that no one else had, and that was to survive under the Myriad Sea. When he first came to the Myriad Sea, Lu Yi had thought that if he encountered an enemy he couldn't beat one day, he would jump into the sea to escape. However, he had never encountered such a situation. He didn't expect to be forced into such a situation at the late Yueyao stage. Lu Yi turned around and looked at Yuan Du and He Yun, who were attacking the defensive formation from afar. A cold glint flashed through his eyes. It hadn't been easy for the Three World Island to reach this point. Under the rules on the surface, no one dared to provoke them. If nothing unexpected happened, the three-world island would stand here for 1,000 years, 10,000 years or even longer. It would provide long-term and powerful support to the development of the Jade Conch galaxy. However, rules were indeed meant to be broken. In the end, his fists weren't strong enough. He had lost Matchless Island back then, and now he was about to lose the three-world island. This made Lu Yi angry and helpless. He still needed to be strong enough. If he was strong enough, he wouldn't have to follow the rules set by others. At that time he could become the one who set the rules. Not good. Yuan Du met Lu Ye's gaze. Although he didn't know what Lu Yi wanted to do, he instinctively felt that something was wrong. He couldn't help but increase the strength of his attacks. Under his and He Yun's fierce attacks, the defensive formation of the entire three-world island shattered like a mirror in a short time. Countless cracks spread and the power of the red talisman was exhausted. A loud crash resounded in all directions. The defensive formation was completely broken. Two figures rushed towards Lu Ye's position at almost the same time, their speed extremely fast. Lu Ye's expression was calm as he stared coldly at He Yun and Yuan Du, as if he wanted to remember their ugly faces deep in his mind. Then he was about to jump into the sea. But at this moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction of the alchemy room. A vigorous aura appeared out of thin air in the alchemy room. This is... Lu Ye's expression couldn't help but change. At this moment he couldn't help but think of the word, how, that the dice of fate had rolled out. This is really? Ma Bin had been in the merfolk territory for more than a year. During this time he had been recuperating in the spirit jade vein. The results were obvious. Although he was far from fully recovered, the injury to his Dao foundation had stabilized and would not continue to worsen. As long as he continued to recuperate like this, he would recover sooner or later. But today he suddenly noticed some abnormalities. In the direction of the celestial spiral palace, it had become very lively. It seemed that many cultivators of the three-world island had come here. In the past, there had often been exchanges between the three-world island and the merfolk territory, but there had never been so many people at once. At first, Ma Bin didn't pay much attention to it, but gradually he found that something was wrong. His divine sense was so powerful that it only took him a little investigation to roughly understand the cause of the matter. The cultivators of the three-world island had come to take refuge. Yuan Du disregarded the rules and joined forces with a purple jade demon venerable to attack the protective array of the three-world island. The three-world island was unable to resist and could only temporarily avoid the attack. This time Ma Bin couldn't sit still. He walked out of the place where he was recuperating and came to the celestial spiral palace. After asking around, he learned that Lu Yi was still in the three-world island. He Baichuan and the others said with certainty that Lu Yi had already made arrangements and there was no need to worry about his safety. After everyone in the three-world island retreated, he would have a way to escape. Ma Bin suppressed his temper and waited in front of the palace. Waiting, but he didn't see Lu Ye's figure. In the end he couldn't wait any longer. Ignoring the dissuasion of others, he stepped out of the palace and prepared to go to the three-world island to see the situation in person. Lu Yi had taken him in and given him hope of recovery. As a junior of the 9 provinces who he thought highly of, how could he just stand by and watch when he was in trouble? Although he wasn't in a good state at the moment, if Lu Yi was really in danger, he wouldn't have a problem protecting him. The moment he stepped into the three-world island, the protective array was broken. Lu Yi stood at the edge of the cliff, as if he was about to jump into the sea in desperation. Yuan Du and He Yun pounced on Lu Yi with lightning speed, as if they were going to kill him. Ma Bin was furious. The aura of a peak sunshine realm cultivator burst out and he roared, "You're courting death." Boom. The alchemy room shattered. Ma Bin turned into a ray of light and rushed to He Yun and Yuan Du. His spiritual power surged and wrapped around the two. He Yun and Yuan Du were both stunned. They didn't expect such a strong cultivator to suddenly appear in the three-world island. But soon Yuan Du's face changed drastically. He exclaimed, "Azure Demon King Ma Bin? Oh, why is this god of death in the three-world island?" And he jumped out at this time. My life is over. Although Yuan Du had never crossed paths with Ma Bin before, he knew how powerful Ma Bin was. After all, it was all thanks to Ma Bin that he was able to take up the post of guardian of the Vientiane Sea. If Ma Bin had not forcibly killed Rizhao back then, the number of guardians of the Vientiane Sea would not have increased, and he would not have had a chance. He was focused on dealing with Lu Yi in the three-world island. He thought that the situation was under his control. But today there were so many unforeseen events and the current one was the most fatal. Even the Azure Demon King Ma Bin had appeared. This guy had been hiding in the three-world island all this time? But that's not right. Jiao Yan had been guarding the three-world island all this time. If Ma Bin was here, how could Jiao Yan not notice him? These two can't have a personal relationship. Ma Bin killed Rizhao of the 9 provinces. If Jiao Yan saw him, she definitely wouldn't let him go. End of chapter. Chapter 1982. When Yuan Du recognized Ma Bin, his heart was filled with regret. If he had known that Ma Bin was in the three-world island, he would not have come here. Did he think that he had lived too long? Under the control of his mind, he could not use his strength at all. He took a blow from Ma Bin and was blown far away. Fortunately, he took out a magic weapon to protect himself at the critical moment. Otherwise, he would have been injured by this blow. As expected of the Azure Demon King Ma Bin, Yuan Du's heart palpitated as he turned his head to look. He saw that Ma Bin had already engaged in a fierce battle with the Black Cloud. The clash of the sun's mana was unrestrained, causing the 4 poles to become unstable and turbulent. For a moment they were actually evenly matched. He Yun is so strong? Yuan Du was stunned for a moment. He knew that He Yun's strength was stronger than his, but it was still surprising that he could fight Ma Bin so well. But soon he realized the reason. Although Ma Bin's momentum was incomparably powerful, and every move contained great power, it always gave people a feeling that it was not smooth enough. After all, he was a sun, so he naturally had a good eyesight. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he understood that Ma Bin was injured. That was why He Yun could fight him as an equal. No matter when Ma Bin was injured and who was the cause of his injury, it was good news for his side. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take down that kid. He Yun's exasperated voice rang out. Ever since Zixin suffered a huge loss because of Yuan Du's instigation, He Yun knew that this guy was unreliable, but he never thought that this guy would be unreliable to this extent. The famous Azure Demon King Ma Bin was hiding in the three-world island, and Yuan Du, as the Sunbeam Guardian of the 10,000 Elephant Sea, didn't know about it at all. Not only that, but Yuan Du was still in a daze while he was fighting Ma Bin. At this time, shouldn't he take the opportunity to take down Lu Ye as a bargaining chip? Ma Bin obviously jumped out because of Lu Ye and the three-world island. At this time, as long as he took down Ma Bin would not attack him. But he had to admit that this Azure Demon King was really strong. If Yuan Du could sense that Ma Bin was injured, how could He Yun, who was fighting him head-on, not be able to sense it? Even so, he was only evenly matched with his opponent. If he was at his peak, how could he be a match for him? As soon as he shouted, Yuan Du immediately moved. At the edge of the cliff, Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh when he saw Yuan Du pouncing towards him again, and his face was filled with helplessness and emotion. This time, his fate was really full of misfortune. As long as he entered the 10,000 Elephant Sea, He Yun and Yuan Du wouldn't be able to catch him no matter how powerful they were. However, his plans could not keep up with the changes. He did not expect that at this critical moment, Ma Bin would actually charge out of the door. This senior from the 9 provinces treated him well. When he sensed his presence in the Azura domain, he immediately turned back to face the enemy. He fought 1 against 4 and in the end, his Dao foundation was damaged rather than implicate him. Today, seeing that he was in trouble, he even disregarded his injuries to face the enemy. From Ma Bin's point of view, what he did was right. Lu Yi was forced to jump into the sea. How could he just stand by and watch? Naturally, he would go out and support the younger generation. But he had disrupted Lu Ye's plan. Lu Yi could only blame Yuan Du and He Yun for coming here so abruptly. Lu Yi had only made arrangements for the cultivators on the island, and had never thought of notifying Ma Bin in advance. By a freak combination of factors, the current situation had occurred. At this moment, Yuan Du was charging towards Lu Yi, but Lu Yi didn't panic at all, because he felt a familiar aura from the door. When he turned his head to look, he saw 2 figures brazenly charging out from that direction, joining forces to meet Yuan Du's attack. Yuan Du turned his head in a daze and saw that it was 2 beautiful women. The aura surging around them was impossible to ignore. How come there were 2 more Rikhas? Where did these 2 come from? He had no idea that the three-world island was hiding so much power. A few years ago, through the use of soul-searching technique on the cultivators of the three-world island, Yuan Du learned many secrets that the island didn't think it knew, but only now did he realize that what he knew was only the tip of the iceberg. The three-world island was hiding a lot. With 2 Rikhas joining forces to attack, Yuan Du didn't dare to be careless, but when he took a closer look, these 2 beautiful women looked a little familiar. He held a grudge against Lu Yi and the Three-World Island, so he naturally paid more attention to the island, so he quickly recognized the two women as the two former island masters of the Three-World Island. A few years ago they were both at the late stage of Yu Yao. One was Luan Xiao from the Jade Conch boundary, and the other was Yen Miao from the Mermaid clan. These two had followed Ma Bin back to the Three-World Island, and when they saw Yuan Du about to attack Lu Yi, they naturally wouldn't sit back and watch. Just two new rikhas. Yuan Du was furious. He couldn't afford to offend Ma Bin, but he couldn't afford to offend two new rikhas who hadn't even been in the Jade Conch boundary for a few years. Did they really think he'd wasted his years of cultivation? His figure flickered, and he summoned a magic treasure to protect himself, and immediately engaged the two women in a fierce battle. Countless onlookers outside the Three-World Island were stunned. In recent years, the Wanxiang Sea had indeed been lively, especially when it had to do with the Three-World Island. Whether it was conquering Baiyu or defeating Zixin, the battles were extraordinarily fierce and exciting. But the cultivators had never thought that there would be an even more exciting scene to watch. Yuan Du and the Black Cloud Venerable had joined forces to attack the Three-World Island. They had thought that the Three-World Island was powerless to resist and could only be slaughtered. But now the Azure Demon King Ma Bin and the Black Cloud Venerable were locked in a fierce battle. Now two new rikhas had blocked Yuan Du and were fighting. Wasn't it said that only the rikhas could stay on the Wanxiang Sea for a long time? 3 new rikhas had popped out of the Three-World Island in such a short time. This was simply ridiculous. The key was that Yuan Du, the island master, didn't seem to know anything about this before. The Yu Yao cultivators who had been recruited by Yuan Du to come with him all had solemn expressions. They secretly rejoiced that the Black Cloud Venerable had come with them. Otherwise, if Yuan Du had led them to attack the Three-World Island alone, they would have been wiped out. In the crowd, Giant Blade Island's Zhao Yunqi trembled. He felt that he couldn't stay in this place for long. Taking advantage of Yuan Du's distraction, he quietly left the crowd and quickly left. Even if Yuan Du would blame him later, he couldn't care too much. At the edge of the cliff, Lu Yi calmly watched. Things had developed to this point and had deviated from his original plan. After today, it would be difficult for the Three-World Island to gain a foothold in the Wanxiang Sea. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that they had harbored Ma Bin was absolutely intolerable in the Wanxiang Galaxy. But it didn't matter too much. The Three-World Island had made a lot of money over the years. In the short term, the Three-World Island's cultivators would have no problem cultivating. Moreover, he had always been worried that it wouldn't be long before he became a rikhas. At that time, he definitely wouldn't be able to stay on the Three-World Island. Most of the Three-World Island's fame came from his name. If he didn't stay on the island, it would be difficult for the Three-World Island's cultivators to protect such a delicious piece of meat. Taking advantage of this opportunity to retreat at the top of the tide was not necessarily a bad choice. Thinking of this, Lu Ye's mood became more relaxed. At this time, under the Wanxiang Sea in the merfolk's territory, a sealed piece of amber suddenly emitted a cracking sound. Inside the amber, Hua Xi's eyes, which had been closed for many years, slowly opened. A faint golden light flashed through them. Upon closer inspection, the golden light was in the shape of an ancient coin. The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she murmured softly, "The heartless man is in trouble." All these years she seemed to have been in a deep slumber, but in reality she hadn't lost her perception of the outside world. Hence, she was aware of everything that happened around her. But because her pet beast had mutated after swallowing that strange ancient coin, even she, its master, was in a strange state. In this state, coupled with the fact that Lu Yi had placed her in a suitable environment, both her and her pet beast's cultivation improved at a terrifying rate. If this state didn't stop, it would continue. But today the Conch Palace was too lively. Not only did it alarm Ma Bin who was recuperating, but it also alarmed Hua Xi who had been sealed all this time. She had planned to unseal herself after she became a rikhas, but since Lu Yi was in trouble, she had no choice but to do it now. When she was sealed, Lu Yi would often visit her and ramble on beside her. She had heard a lot of infuriating things. The heartless man thought that she couldn't sense him, so he told her a lot of things, but he didn't know that she could hear him. Kacha. The amber shattered and Hua Xi stepped out of it. Her temperament had changed drastically compared to before. Her appearance was even more beautiful, and even her black hair was slightly rippling with a strange golden light. A strange sound came out. Hua Xi lowered her head and looked at the golden toad in her arms. This guy used to be bumpy and ugly, but now it had been reborn with its master. It had the blood of a Pichio, so it was no longer as ugly as it used to be. Its body was covered in a golden light, and there were also marks in the shape of golden coins on its body. It looked noble and extraordinary. Yes, you also think that he should be taught a lesson. Wuxia nodded slightly. Gua. After a while, in front of the Conch Palace's door, Shui Yuan looked at Wuxia in surprise. Junior sister, you're awake? In the entire three-world island, Shui Yuan was the closest to Wuxia. Both of them were from the Jade Blood sect and were senior sisters and junior sisters. They were also medical cultivators. It could be said that Shui Yuan was both Huaxi's senior sister and Huaxi's master. She had taught her many things. In response to Shui Yuan's question, Huaxi merely glanced at her and blinked silently. Then, she expressionlessly walked towards the door that was about to disappear. Shui Yuan couldn't help but be stunned. For some reason, Huaxi's gaze was extremely strange. End of chapter. Chapter 1983. Senior Sister Huaxi? A cultivator who knew Huaxi called out softly. Huaxi turned her head and looked over indifferently. When their eyes met, the cultivator couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. For some inexplicable reason, a feeling of inferiority arose in his heart. He was not the only one who felt this way. Most of the cultivators present felt the same way. It was as if Huaxi was a high and mighty goddess, and they were the filthy insects in the mud. Just looking at her was blasphemy. Many people quickly lowered their heads. When they came back to their senses, Huaxi had disappeared. The portal also disappeared completely. Oh no. Only then did someone realize, it's not safe on the island now. Huaxi. Everyone was surprised by Huaxi's change. No one expected her to return to the three-world island at this time. It would not have mattered if it was before, but the sunshine battle had broken out there. Yuan Du, He Yun, Ma Bin, Wan Xiao, and Yen Miao were fighting. How could Huaxi end well if she rushed in like this? Where's Yaya? Shui Yuan discovered another thing that frightened her. Yaya, who had always been by her side, had disappeared without her noticing. The two sunshine battle groups on the three-world island were locked in a fierce battle. Ma Bin and He Yun were evenly matched, but Ma Bin could not maintain this state for long. His Dao foundation had not recovered. It was not the right time to fight fiercely. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Wan Xiao and Yen Miao were fighting Yuan Du together. They were not in a good situation. Although they were fighting 1 against 2, they had just reached the sunshine level not long ago. Yuan Du had reached the sunshine level many years ago. In terms of cultivation, he was definitely stronger. If that was all, it would not be a big deal. The key was that there were other suns on the vast Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the Wanxiang Island. Even from far away, he could clearly feel that there were several powerful auras approaching. It would not take long for them to reach the three-world island. They were the other 4 guardians of the Wanxiang Sea. With such a big change happening on the three-world island, even the Azure Demon King Ma Bin appeared. How could they just stand by and watch? Ma Bin's side had a grudge with the Wanxiang Galaxy, so no matter which side they stood on, the 4 of them had to come and help Yuan Du. Lu Yi knew that something was wrong. He had to leave before the 4 Rizhao arrived. Otherwise he would never be able to leave. He wouldn't be in any danger. At worst, he would just have to jump into the sea. However, Ma Bin, Wan Xiao, and Smoky Miao had to leave quickly. If they left now, they still had a chance to escape. The longer they delayed, the greater the risk. How did the situation develop to this point? Lu Ye's face was full of helplessness. He clenched his fist lightly. In his heart, he even had the thought of breaking through to Sunshine right now. He had already accumulated enough foundation and could break through to the Sunshine realm at any time. The only reason he was delaying it was to polish his spiritual source. If he was Rizhao, he wouldn't be standing here and watching. In the end, he suppressed the impulse in his heart. In order to polish his art source, he had put in a lot of effort. If he gave up now, then all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Lu Ye's divine sense surged, and just as he was about to send a message to Ma Bin and the others to retreat, Lu Yi suddenly caught a glimpse of a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. Lu Yi turned to look, and the corner of his eye twitched. The small figure skipped over to Lu Yi and looked up at him. Her cute face was full of mischief. "Why did you run over here?" Lu Yi hurriedly bent down and hugged Yaya. But it didn't matter. If he only had Yaya, he could still escape by jumping into the sea. But for some reason he felt that Yaya was a little different today. His neck tightened as Yaya stretched out her hands and hugged him. Her little head was pressed against his chest as she sniffed deeply, as if she wanted to remember Lu Ye's scent in her heart. Then her soft voice sounded, "Daddy, it's time to say goodbye." Lu Yi was stunned. "Why?" A small hand suddenly pressed on his lips, stopping him from speaking. Yaya raised her head and smiled brightly at him. A strange light flashed in her eyes, and a wicked expression appeared on her small face. "Also, don't let me catch you and beat you to death in the future." You. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. Before he could say anything, Yaya had jumped out of his arms and rushed toward the nearest battle. That was the battlefield where Yuan Du, Wan Xiao, and Yen Miao were. His small figure was so inconspicuous, but at this moment countless pairs of eyes were focused on him. The main reason was that this scene was too sudden. Even Yu Yao could not casually interfere in such a battle of sunshine, but now, a child had suddenly appeared. Yuan Du also noticed Yaya's approach. He had always known of Yaya's existence. After all, he had been paying attention to the three-world island. But he didn't know about Yaya's background. He only thought that she was a junior brought over by Lu Yi from the 9 states. At this moment, seeing Yaya rushing toward him, Yuan Du was furious. Today was supposed to be a good day for him to take down Lu Yi and seize the three-world island. But in the end, his foolproof plan had made one mistake after another. As a result, not only did he fail to take down Lu Yi, but he was also besieged by 2 women. A child who came out of nowhere dared to offend him. "Get lost." Yuan Du waved his sleeves, and when the surging supernatural power rolled out, it wrapped Yaya in an instant. Yaya left quickly and came back quickly. Her small figure flew backward like a kite with a broken string. Lu Ye's heart tightened. Although he knew that Yaya had the power of sunshine and that such a blow couldn't do anything to her, he still couldn't help but worry. Yaya's small face suddenly showed a look of anger, and then she rushed toward Yuan Du again. But this time, halfway through, she suddenly raised her 2 lotus root-like white arms and touched them in the middle. "Break!" Yaya's voice rang out. The jade bracelets on her wrists suddenly shattered, turning into spots of fluorescent light that enveloped her. In the light, the small figure twisted and changed rapidly. By the time Yaya rushed out of the light, her whole person had changed greatly. The little girl, who looked to be only 7 or 8 years old, was now tall and slim. Her face was cold and beautiful, and her black hair was like a waterfall. Every strand of hair was dancing and twisting like a living thing. Her clothes had also changed into a rainbow-colored dress, which was dazzling. She was obviously a heavenly beauty, but her aura was as fierce as an ancient ferocious beast, intimidating everyone. The sudden change stunned everyone who saw this scene. Even Ma Bin and He Yun, who were fighting in the distance, couldn't help but turn their heads to look. Another sunshine. The spectating cultivators were numb. What kind of dragon's pool and tiger's den was this three-world island? 3 sunshine were not enough, but there was a 4th one, and in such an unimaginable way. On second thought, there were 4 sunshine cultivators hiding in the three-world island. What were they trying to do? The Wanxiang Sea would never allow an outsider sunshine to stay for too long. On the edge of the cliff in the three-world island, Lu Yi frowned at Yaya's change. Although he didn't understand why Yaya said those words before, he could feel one thing: he was about to lose Yaya. This cheap daughter he picked up from the Mist Dragon had brought him a lot of warmth, and she had helped him out of danger several times. But after all, Yaya had a background. When he picked her up, her divine soul was injured and she was unconscious, causing her memory to be damaged. But the Great Sunshine was acting like a child. After so many years, Lu Yi could vaguely feel that Yaya was slowly recovering. And her 2 jade bracelets, which belonged to her, were also found in the Mist Dragon. The bracelets were broken, and Yaya returned to her original appearance. In this way, the 2 jade bracelets should be a kind of seal, which sealed Yaya's cultivation and memory. Now that the bracelets were broken, she had regained everything. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of method this was, but at this moment he felt a little suffocated. While he was thinking, Yaya had brazenly charged into the battle group where Yuan Du was. Her surging spiritual power surged and her figure intertwined. Even if Lu Yi used his full eyesight, he couldn't see the specific situation of the battle clearly. He only heard a muffled groan, and then a figure fell from the sky into the Wanxiang Sea like a meteorite. Seawater splashed everywhere. There were cries of surprise all around. The 10,000 elephant sea's water was a terrifying representation. Although everyone knew that the 10,000 elephant sea's water was the condensation of starry sky spirit energy, it was too corrosive. It was so corrosive that even Rizhao didn't dare to enter it at will. As for Rizhao, once he fell into the sea he would definitely die. Therefore, when cultivators fought on the Wanxiang Sea, The first thing they had to pay attention to was not to be knocked into the sea by the enemy. This was something that everyone tried to avoid. But no one expected that Sunshine couldn't avoid something that even the Yu Yao constellation tried to avoid. Everyone saw clearly that the one who fell into the sea was not someone else, but Yuan Du, who had come aggressively before. In any case, he was still a veteran Rikashi. Just now he had the upper hand in a 1-on-2 fight. Now the third Rikashi had joined the battle. In just a few breaths he had been beaten into the sea. One could imagine how strong this third Rikashi was. In the battle group, Wan Xiao and Yen Miao were a little dumbfounded, staring blankly at the beautiful woman standing beside them. "Yaya." Wan Xiao called softly. On the woman's facial features, traces of Yaya's appearance could be vaguely seen, as if Yaya had grown up. She also clearly saw how the woman changed from Yaya to this appearance. But the current situation was still somewhat beyond her understanding. End of chapter. Chapter 1984. Wan Xiao knew that Yaya was Rizhao, but she never knew that Yaya was so powerful after recovering. The onlookers couldn't see the battle clearly, but how could she and Yen Miao not know? The power that Yaya burst out at that moment was not something that new Rizhao like her and Yen Miao could compare with. Not to mention that Yuan Du was already restrained by the two of them. Even if it was a 1-on-1 fight, Wan Xiao estimated that Yuan Du could not last more than 10 breaths under Yaya's hands, and it was inevitable that he would be beaten into the sea. In the past, when Yaya was playing around in the Three-World Island, Wan Xiao also took care of her. Because Lu Yi was not in the Three-World Island all year round, and Shueyuan was always in charge of the alchemy room, she did not pay much attention to Yaya. On the contrary, she, the former island master, spent a lot of time with Yaya. Wan Xiao had always liked this little girl, and once thought that if she could find someone she liked, she might be able to give birth to such a child. In the past, Yaya was relatively close to her. But at this moment, Wan Xiao felt that there was a dangerous aura around Yaya, which made her look sluggish. Yaya turned her head again and looked in the direction of Lu Yi. Their eyes met and she snorted with a cold look. Her divine thoughts surged and she transmitted a message, "Live well before I catch you, don't die." Then she quickly swept away looking like she was in a hurry. Lu Yi frowned. In just a dozen breaths, Yaya had changed into a completely different person. Before the seal was lifted, she deliberately ran over to hug her, looking very reluctant. But after the seal was lifted, Lu Yi felt that there was hostility in Yaya's eyes. It was a kind of shame and anger from the past that she could not bear to look back on. Then she remembered what Yaya said before. Was she really going to catch her and beat her to death? She sighed deeply. Her worries from a long time ago had come true. Yaya, who had recovered her Rizhao body, really cared about all the things that happened before. When she was still a child, she was affected by that state and her mind was innocent. But once she recovered, it was completely different. Thinking about it, it was hard for anyone to accept what happened to Yaya. That was a stain in life, and since it was a stain, it naturally had to be erased. But on second thought, if Yaya really cared about this stain, then she should not have gone to deal with Yuan Du after the seal was lifted. Instead, she should have gone to deal with him first. But she still went to deal with Yuan Du. Looking at it this way, Yaya was also tough on the mouth but soft on the heart, or it could be said that there were contradictions in her heart. However, there was one thing that puzzled Lu Yi. Why was Yaya running so fast? She seemed to be hiding from something. Just as he was thinking about this, an extremely strong energy fluctuation suddenly emerged in midair, followed by a bright pattern that quickly spread out and outlined, turning into an extremely complex pattern. Lu Yi frowned and looked at it with rapt attention. With a glance, he could see that there were traces of void spirit runes in the complicated pattern. This is a teleportation formation built with void spirit runes as the foundation? It was very different from the teleportation formation that he had set up himself, but Lu Yi could feel that this teleportation formation was very exquisite. Who set this up? And he did not know if it was a coincidence or not, but the location where this teleportation formation appeared was exactly where Yaya had revealed her original appearance after the seal was lifted, and there were still remnants of Yaya's aura there. This teleportation formation appeared very abruptly and was so large and conspicuous that Lu Yi saw it, and so did the others. For a moment they were surprised and thought that it was a trick set up by the Three-World Island. The next moment, a fleshless skeletal hand suddenly reached out from the teleportation formation. Although it was only a large hand, it was filled with a monstrous aura that caused the space to distort. Wan Xiao and Yen Miao, who were near the teleportation formation, changed their expressions and hurriedly dodged. The skeletal hand twisted and struggled, and the teleportation formation surged. Behind the hand, a figure was about to cross the teleportation formation. Roar! A roar came out and the teleportation formation suddenly expanded. Under the distortion of the void, a huge figure appeared out of thin air above the 10,000 elephant sea. It was a skeleton without any flesh on its body, and only 2 balls of dark flames burned in its eyes. The strong aura on its body had obviously reached the level of Rizhao, and it was no ordinary Rizhao. This was a Bone Clan cultivator. Another Rizhao. The surrounding cultivators were dumbfounded. Normally, Rizhao was rarely seen, but today Rizhao cultivators appeared one after another as if they were free. Was this also the hidden Rizhao of the Three-World Island? Many people were puzzled. However, at this moment, another figure appeared from the teleportation formation right after Rizhao of the Bone Clan. This guy was not from the Bone Clan, but looked like a demon. He had 2 pitch-black curved horns on his head and wore a black robe. It was Rizhao again. Moreover, whether it was the Bone Clan or this demon, their auras were not inferior to Ma Bin and He Yun who were fighting nearby. This undoubtedly meant that they were at the same level as He Yun. As soon as this demon appeared, he cursed, "Ultra-long-distance teleportation is really an unbearable experience." There were many wounds on his face and exposed skin, obviously caused by forceful teleportation. However, he was strong and these wounds disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. After scanning with his divine sense, this demon raised his eyebrows. "This is the Wanxiang Sea?" He looked around and nodded slightly. "How lively." Then he smiled as if there was no one around. "Don't be nervous, we're just passing by. You can continue." After that, he grabbed something to the side as if he had caught something. He put it to the tip of his nose and sniffed it, murmuring, "Let me see where our saintess escaped to." He closed and opened his eyes, and immediately looked in the direction Yaya escaped. "Over there." Brr. Rizhao of the Bone Clan roared and turned into a ray of light and flew forward. Rizhao of the Demon Clan followed closely behind, and the 2 figures disappeared in an instant. Lu Yi looked at this scene quietly and his expression changed. He finally knew why Yaya left in a hurry. She was obviously avoiding the 2 Rizhao who suddenly appeared. Saintess? Lu Yi recalled what the Demon Clan had said, and doubts arose in his heart. What kind of force did Yaya come from? If she was the saintess of this force, why was she avoiding Rizhao? The only thing Lu Yi could determine was that this force must be very strong, because this kind of ultra-long-distance teleportation was not something that anyone could perform. It must have the support of an entire force behind it. As for why this teleportation array appeared here, Lu Yi vaguely guessed that it had something to do with Yaya's unsealing. Before she was unsealed, this powerful force could not detect her existence at all, but today she was forced to be unsealed, and her whereabouts were exposed, so the other party quickly used the remnants of her aura as the source to build an ultra-long-distance teleportation array. If Yaya had not run fast, she would have encountered these 2 strange Rizhao, and it would be hard to say whether she would be lucky or not. Looking at it this way, Yaya could have recovered her strength a long time ago, but she had not done so. Instead, she maintained the state of a child to survive on the island of the 3 realms, because it was better to hide. Until today, when she sensed danger on his side, she unsealed herself and helped him. But that was all she could do. After dealing with Yuan Du, she would immediately escape. With this thought in mind, Lu Yi knew that it was time to retreat. Now the situation in the Wanxiang Sea was chaotic, and the ultra-long-distance teleportation array still existed. Who knew if there were more experts coming? This was a place of trouble and he could not stay for long. Wan Xiaoa and Yen Miao did not have to worry too much. Yen Miao had a golden conch, which could slightly isolate the water of the Wanxiang Sea. In the past, Lu Yi and Yen Miao had the experience of swimming all the way out of the Wanxiang Sea from the mermaid territory. At that time, thanks to the isolation of the golden conch, she could jump into the sea with Wan Xiaoa to escape. Then only Ma Bin's side was left, which was not difficult. He Yun was on par with him, and if Ma Bin insisted on jumping into the sea, He Yun could not stop him. When the time came, he would pick up Ma Bin under the sea and meet up with Yen Miao, and they could rush back to the mermaid territory from the sea. As for Ma Bin being eroded by the water of the Wanxiang Sea, he could help to solve it. Just as Lu Yi was planning to do so, something strange happened again. With a splash, a figure jumped out from under the Wanxiang Sea. It was Yuan Du, who had been knocked down into the Wanxiang Sea before. At this moment, his body was shrouded in a black fog as if he was poisoned. His originally clear spiritual power had become turbid, and his momentum had plummeted. his eyes were filled with bitter resentment, and after appearing he ignored everyone else and rushed towards Lu Ye's position. He hated Lu Yi to the core. His original plan was going well, but now he was being suppressed everywhere. When he was knocked down into the Wanxiang Sea, although he survived with his powerful cultivation, in that short period of time, he was eroded by the water of the Wanxiang Sea. He would not be able to resolve this level of erosion in his lifetime. In other words, from now on, not only would he have no room to improve, he would not even be able to maintain his original cultivation. As time passed, he might even fall to the sunshine level. So now he only had one thought, and that was to kill Lu Yi to vent the hatred in his heart. If it were not for Lu Yi, he would not have lost face back then. If it were not for Lu Yi, he would not have been targeting the Three-World Island, and he would not have suffered today. All of this was because of Lu Yi of the Three-World Island. Yuan Du rushed over, but Lu Yi did not move. He just looked at him expressionlessly. Compared to before, Yuan Du's spiritual power was extremely turbid, and the power of his attacks was not even 30% of before. Lu Yi even had a feeling that he could barely deal with Yuan Du in this state. However, he did not need to do it himself. Wan Xiao and Yan Miao had already joined forces to kill him. The two women arrived first, and as their spiritual power surged, Yuan Du's body was suddenly covered in blood. He was knocked down somewhere on the Three-World Island, gasping for breath. He lay on the ground in a sorry state with a big hole in his chest and the top of his head. If it were not for Rizhao's powerful vitality, he would have died from such injuries. Chapter 1985. Yuan Du was not dead, but he had fallen into the 10,000 Elephant Sea and was contaminated by its water. Now that he was seriously injured, he was not far from death. Unless he was treated in time, there was still a chance for him to survive. Almost at the same time as Yuan Du was injured, a sorrowful and angry shout suddenly rang out, "Senior brother Yuan Du!" Immediately after, several Rizhao's auras descended on the Three-World Island. They were the other 4 Rizhao guardians who had rushed over after sensing that something was wrong. It would take some time to get here from the 10,000 Elephant Island, but they still managed to arrive in time. The 4 of them had obviously discussed this beforehand. When they arrived at the battlefield, one of them immediately joined the battle between Ma Bin and He Yun. The 10,000 Elephant Sea hated Ma Bin to the bone. Now that there was a rare opportunity to kill him, they naturally did not want to miss it. Originally, Ma Bin and He Yun were evenly matched in their fight. Any interference from outside could break the balance. Of the remaining 3, one rushed towards Yuan Du, undoubtedly to check on his condition, while the other 2 rushed towards Lu Yi. They were well aware of the cause and effect. Today's incident was caused by Yuan Du's selfishness. He had joined forces with He Yun to attack the Three-World Island. At first, they did not take it too seriously. As long as Yuan Du was dealt with quickly, the situation would be clean and there would not be too much trouble. The only trouble they would have to face was Jiao Yan's questioning. But since Yuan Du had decided to do this, he must have been prepared. However, the situation had developed beyond everyone's expectations. A mere Three-World Island had hidden so many Rizhao and even harbored the Azure Demon King Ma Bin. It was obvious how ambitious they were. At first, they felt that the Three-World Island was a little innocent and pitiful, being targeted by Yuan Du, but now, they were incomparably glad. If Yuan Du had not targeted them, they would not have discovered the true face of the Three-World Island. Who knew when the problems of the Three-World Island would suddenly erupt? At that time, the commotion would be even greater than today's. Although the current situation was chaotic, they only needed to take down Lu Yi and deal with Ma Bin. 2 Rizhao guardians attacking one Yu Yao showed their determination to quickly take down Lu Yi. "Junior brother, run!" Wan Xiao shouted. Together with Yan Miao, they met the 2 Rizhao guardians head-on. But how could the 2 girls be a match for them? They were at a disadvantage as soon as they exchanged blows. The situation was precarious. Lu Ye's expression. There was no end to this. He had tried several times to order Rizhao to evacuate, but he was interrupted by various accidents. At this point, whether it was Ma Bin, Wan Xiao, or Yan Miao, it was not easy for them to evacuate. Their side no longer had any combat power that they could bring out. On the other hand, there was still Rizhao from Wanxiang Sea who did not participate in the battle. He was currently checking on Yuan Du's injuries. Putting aside the fact that Wan Xiao and Misty Smoke were no match for the enemy, Ma Bin's condition had just improved. If the battle went on for too long, it would be difficult for him to hold on. At that time, even Ma Bin would be defeated. Sunshine. Sure enough, he still needed to be promoted to Sunshine to have the ability to participate in such a battle. He couldn't just stand here and watch helplessly. Lu Yi gently clenched his fist, and his magic power began to surge. Although it was regretful, there were many things in life that did not go according to one's wishes. Only by overcoming the current crisis would one have the qualifications to talk about the future. Just as he was about to cut off all means of retreat and advance to Rizhao, a panicked aura suddenly enveloped him, followed by a powerful divine sense attack. Lu Yi only felt a buzzing in his head. If it were not for the seven-colored divine lotus stabilizing his divine soul, his mind would have been injured. Raising his head, he saw that one of the two sunshine guards that Luan Xiao and Yen Miao had joined hands with was already charging towards him. Lu Yi recognized this person. It seemed to be Gu Shi from the Tianyan realm. It was this person who had just used his soul power to attack him. After all, Luan Xiao and Misty Smoke's strength was much lower. The two women wanted to join forces to stop the other two, but it was impossible. In just a few breaths of time, Gu Shi escaped, leaving the other person to fight the two of them alone. Even so, the two women had to fight with all their strength. Malignant tumor, I can't let you live. Gu Shi looked at Lu Yi, his face full of murderous intent. It was obvious that he wanted to kill him. Yuan Du and Lu Yi had a grudge against each other, so he targeted Lu Yi and the Three-World Island. Gu Shi simply didn't like Lu Yi and the Three-World Island. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wouldn't show mercy. Now that Gu Shi was attacking, how could Lu Yi stay where he was? He turned around to escape. He could enter the sea at any time, so he had long been prepared. But at this moment, somewhere in the Three-World Island, a dazzling golden light suddenly shot out. The golden light was extremely fast, and there was no warning before it was shot out. Not only did Lu Yi not notice it, but even Rizhao like Gu Shi didn't react at all. The golden light hit Gu Shi's body. Lu Yi's figure paused. He didn't expect that at this time, there would still be someone on the Three-World Island who dared to attack Gu Shi. Who was it? However, when he saw Gu Shi state clearly, he couldn't help but be stunned. Because at this moment, a layer of golden light had appeared on Gu Shi's body for some unknown reason. The golden light was densely packed with the imprints of ancient coins. The shape and appearance of these coins looked a little familiar. At the same time, the anger and murderous intent on Gu Shi's face quickly disappeared, replaced by astonishment and panic. He maintained his flying posture, but his entire body was shrouded in a layer of golden light. This golden light had a terrifying binding power, rendering him immobile. He couldn't even channel the arcane energy in his body. Then, under Lu Yi's confused gaze, Gu Shi fell several dozen feet in front of him. Due to inertia, he slowly came to a stop a short distance away. Even after falling to the ground, Gu Shi still maintained his flying posture, looking extremely comical. Lu Yi abruptly turned his head and saw a familiar figure standing at the pill room's location, quietly watching him. Wuxia. Lu Yi's eyes widened. Why was she here? And when did she come back? He didn't notice at all. Moreover, he had just gone to the sea to visit her a few days ago. At that time, she showed no signs of waking up, so he didn't expect her to come back now. At this moment, Wuxia was standing there quietly, holding a golden toad pet beast in her arms. Under the hazy golden halo, her expression was serene, but there was an awe-inspiring and sacred feeling about her. Needless to say, the golden light that hit Gu Shi just now must have come from her means. And the source of this means came from that strange ancient coin. Back then, Lu Yi had even used that ancient coin to imprison a sunshine-level star beast under the sea. It was obvious how powerful the ancient coin was. Lu Yi even suspected that it might be a starry sky treasure. Otherwise, it couldn't possibly have such ridiculous power. Back then, when he set off for the Yinyang Great Millstone, he gave the ancient coin to Wuxia for safekeeping. It could be considered as giving her a way to protect herself on the Thousand Crescent Sea. At the same time, it was also a trump card for Three-World Island. However, one day when Wuxia was playing with the ancient coin, she was swallowed by her pet beast. Since then, the pet beast and its owner, Wuxia, had been sealed in a piece of amber. Lu Yi didn't know what happened to cause this, but after all these years, Huaxi's vitality still remained, and her strength seemed to be growing stronger all the time. When she reappeared today, Lu Yi sensed from afar that Huaxi's aura was so vigorous that it was not inferior to his own. This was outrageous. He was now a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, but Huaxi's aura was not inferior to his. Didn't that mean she also had the same cultivation level? The reason his cultivation level could rise so quickly was because of the innate skill tree. As for Huaxi, the ancient coin could also devour the Thousand Crescent Sea's water. She and her pet beast were sealed in the amber and placed under the sea by Lu Yi. All these years she had been constantly devouring the 1,000 Crescent Seas water, so it wasn't strange for her to grow so much. The only thing that puzzled Lu Yi was that Huaxi's gaze was a little wooden, even a little arrogant. But with the current situation he didn't have time to think too deeply about it. Looking down at Gu Shi who was not far in front of him, Lu Ye's expression changed. He had already decided to advance to Sunshine on the spot, even if it meant leaving behind regrets, because only by advancing to Sunshine could he participate in the battle and have a chance to change the situation. But what if he could advance without leaving any regrets? It wasn't that he didn't have the ability, but his experience in the Azura field and Su Yuqing and Ma Bin's previous warnings made him unwilling to do so. Or rather, he didn't have the opportunity before. But now the opportunity was right in front of him. Who is it? An angry shout interrupted Lu Ye's thoughts. A figure flew up and looked warily in Huaxi's direction. It was Qin Xuanba of the High Heavens continent. He had gone to check on Yuandu's condition at the first opportunity because among the several Sunshine Guardians, he had the best personal relationship with Yuandu, so he was naturally the most concerned about his injuries. After investigating he was shocked. Although Yuandu was not dead, his injuries were serious and shocking. He could tell at a glance that even if Yuandu was lucky enough to survive, it would be difficult for him to maintain his sunshine cultivation in the future. The corrosion of the 1,000 Crescent Seas water was simply unsolvable. The only thing he could do was to give Yuandu a large pill to preserve his life for the time being. But then he saw a scene that made his soul jump out of his body. After an inexplicable golden light shot out, Gu Shi, who was also a sunshine guardian like him, was imprisoned on the spot and fell straight to the ground. It wasn't until he was in midair that he saw clearly who had attacked him. It was a woman who looked extremely noble and holy in the golden light, holding a golden toad-like pet beast in her arms. Scanning with his divine sense, Qin Xuanba frowned because he could clearly sense that this woman's cultivation was only at Yu Yao's level. If that was the case, then what was the deal with the golden light that could imprison Sunshine? He thought another Sunshine had appeared on the three-world island. If it wasn't Sunshine, then it must be the power of a magic weapon. But what kind of magic weapon could be so terrifying? Chapter 1986. Before Qin Xuanba could figure it out, a golden light flashed in his field of vision just like the one he saw earlier. He was shocked and wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The speed of the golden light was beyond his imagination. Even someone as strong as him had no room to dodge. He even had a feeling that once the golden light appeared, he would definitely be hit. No matter how hard he tried to dodge, it would be useless. Qin Xuanba was hit directly. In the next moment, his body sank and his mana was sealed. Just like Gu Shi, he fell straight to the ground. All the spectating cultivators were stunned. Today's conflict on the three-world island had one unforeseen event after another. It was simply too much for the eyes to take in. The strength of three-world island's hidden forces was also shocking. Before today, everyone thought that even if three-world island was a top-notch spiritual island, as long as Rizhao attacked, it would be completely unstoppable. But in reality, at this point in the battle, the 5 Rizhao of the Wanxiangxi had attacked together, but they only managed to break one of three-world island's protective arrays. They could not do anything to three-world island at all. Such a foundation was simply unheard of. What was even more inconceivable was how three-world island was able to hide so much power under the watchful eyes of the Rizhao guards. The sudden turn of events shocked the other group that was fighting near the three-world island. It was Mu Qing's battle against Luan Xiao and Miao Yan. Originally, Mu Qing could only defend herself against the 2 new Rizhao, Luan Xiao and Miao Yan. But after noticing what happened to Gu Shi and Qin Xuanba, she had no choice but to conserve some of her strength just in case. She was even quietly moving the battlefield further away to avoid being killed by Huaxi. Because of this, Luan Xiao and Miao Yan's situation became much better. As for Ma Bin, He Yun, Mo Wen and Li's battle, they had already fought tens of thousands of miles away. The 3 of them were giving it their all, but they did not notice the changes on Three-World Island. In the Three-World Island, Lu Yi walked step by step towards Gu Shi, who was lying on the ground but still in a strange flying posture. He looked down at him with an indifferent expression. Why? Why do you have to force me? He never had much ambition. He only occupied the Three-World Island because he wanted to establish a foothold in the myriad phenomenon sea and earn enough cultivation resources for the cultivators of the 3 worlds. He only needed to wait for a few more years, gather enough resources and polish his Dharma source to perfection. Once he achieved sunshine, he would leave the Wanxiang Sea. From the time he conquered Baiwa to the time he defeated Zixin, everything he did was within the rules of the Wanxiang Sea. He never had the intention to break the rules. Even if Wan Xiaoa and Yen Miao were promoted to Rizhao, they still stayed obediently in the mermaid territory. The reason why the Myriad Elephant Sea was able to maintain its prosperity for so many years was because of these rules and restrictions. Rashly breaking them would not benefit anyone. However, while he abided by the rules, the person who set the rules was not willing to abide by them. This was very comical. If the person who set the rules wasn't willing to abide by them, then someone else could only set the rules. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. Lu Yi sighed. His entire body glowed with a bloody light. Looking at the once lofty and unapproachable Rizhao, who was now lying motionless in front of him, he suddenly realized that all the injustices in this world must be fiercely resisted. The sea of blood rolled and spread out, covering his and Guxi's figures. Outsiders could no longer see the situation inside. Lu Yi reached out to grab Guxi's head. Guxi seemed to sense that something was wrong. Ever since he was imprisoned, he had been waiting for this opportunity. He fiercely activated the power of his divine spirit and used a divine spirit secret technique. Lu Yi vaguely saw an incomparably sharp sword light slashing towards him. However, the strange thing was that the sword light was not physical. After it cut into his body, he did not feel any pain. His expression was slightly dazed. At the same time, in the deity sea, the sword light was rampant. However, under the wash of the rainbow light of the divine lotus, the rampant sword light quickly lost its power and disappeared. Only then did Lu Yi come to his senses. He felt pain in his head. A divine spirit secret technique. Lu Yi understood. It seemed that the method Hua Ci inherited from the ancient coin could seal a cultivator's magic power and physical body. However, it could not seal a cultivator's divine spirit. That was why Guxi was able to use a divine spirit secret technique. If it was an ordinary Yu Yao, her divine spirit would definitely be injured. She might even die on the spot. Fortunately, Lu Yi had the divine lotus to protect his deity sea. His divine spirit was slightly damaged. After all, that was a full-strength attack from Rizhao. However, it was not a big deal. He only needed to rest and he would recover. Guxi's eyes were filled with shock. He could not understand why his secret technique did not work. In the next instant, Lu Ye's palm landed on his head. The roots of the talent tree quickly spread and extended. Lu Ye's voice rang in his ears. Die. Guxi's eyes suddenly widened, as if they were about to explode and become bloodshot in an instant. This was because when Lu Yi attacked, an indescribable pain swept through his entire body. He clearly felt his blood, magic power, and even his soul being crazily devoured by an unknown force. In contrast, Lu Ye's face was filled with joy. His eyes were tightly shut, and his body could not help but tremble. In a previous experience in the Azura field, Lu Yi had devoured many shadows. He had also experienced what it felt like to use the talent tree to devour living creatures. However, only now did he realize that devouring shadows was completely different from devouring real living creatures. The fatal pleasure was several times greater than the former. Especially when Guxi was a Rizhao. He almost sank into it in an instant, unable to extricate himself. Fortunately, he was prepared for this. His tongue was bitten off. Intense pain spread through his body. The taste of blood in his mouth made Lu Ye's consciousness slightly sober. His strong physique allowed his injured tongue to quickly recover. Once again it was bitten off. This cycle repeated over and over again. Lu Ye's expression was ferocious and terrifying. Blood flowed from his mouth like a malicious spirit. Guxi's aura rapidly weakened. From Rizhao to Yu Yao to Xingxiu, his vitality dimmed, and his aura withered. In just a moment his whole body became dry and withered. His eyes were wide open and he had completely lost his vitality. The sea of blood roared. Guxi's corpse was washed away by the sea of blood and turned into powder. Only a few storage rings were left behind. Not enough. Lu Yi sensed his own body. His qi and blood were surging violently, and his magic power was surging to the extreme. His damaged spirit had already recovered, but his spiritual source had yet to reach a perfect level. In the sea of blood, his gaze turned to another direction. It was where Yuan Du and Qin Xuanba were. Since I've chosen this path, even if it's wrong, I'll continue. With this thought in mind, his body moved. The sea of blood roiled and soon enveloped Yuan Du and Qin Xuanba's location. Of the two Rizhao, one was hanging on by his life because of the effect of the Great Pill, while the other was hit by the golden light of the treasure coin. Like Gushi, he could not move. Suddenly falling into the sea of blood, they were both shocked. They did not notice Gushi's death. It's Luya. He really is a blood breed. Yuan Du coughed lightly. His face was pale and he instantly understood who had done this. At first, he had decided to frame Lu Yi with a blood breed so that he would have a reason to attack the Three-World Island. In the end, the blood breed, who had agreed in advance, suddenly changed sides. This made him realize that his framing might be true. Otherwise, he could not explain why the blood breed would do such a thing. The betrayal of a blood breed was undoubtedly a cover for one of their own. How ugly! A voice came. Yuan Du's expression changed. He turned around and saw Lu Yi standing beside him. You. Yuan Du was furious. He was about to attack, but as soon as he circulated his magic power, he felt a sharp pain all over his body. He had no strength at all. Why are you targeting the Three-World Island? We're just a group of outsiders, a group of poor people struggling to survive in the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi looked at Yuan Du. The entire Wanxiang Sea is filled with people like you. Can't you see that Rizhao is high and mighty? Yuan Du snorted coldly. Immoral people are not worthy of high positions. Boy, after what happened to the Three-World Island today, you have no future to speak of. Moreover, you dared to harbor Ma Bin. If this matter spreads, even Juyin will not tolerate you. If you know what's good for you, obediently stretch out your neck and then hand over the treasure that connects the merfolk's territory. Perhaps you can still save the disciples of the Three-World Island. Immoral? Lu Ye's eyes flashed. He suddenly slapped Yuan Du. The slap sent Yuan Du flying into the air. Half of his face was swollen, as expected of Rizhao's physical body. If it were Yu Yao, her head would have exploded from this slap. However, Yuan Du only suffered minor injuries. Landing heavily on the ground, Yuan Du stared in disbelief at Lu Yi, who was walking towards him step by step. He never imagined that he would one day be humiliated like this in front of Yu Yao. The reverse blood flow attacked his heart. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his injuries worsened. You think you're worthy of being called immoral? Lu Yi stepped forward, grabbed Yuan Du by the neck and lifted him up. His face was right in front of Yuan Du's and he stared at him coldly. Who do you think you are? Yuan Du struggled with all his might. However, a look of horror soon appeared on his face as he screamed in pain. He felt something extra in his body. Then, his essence, energy and spirit were being devoured. Rizhao's foundation was rapidly draining away. However, Lu Ye's voice still echoed in his ears. By the way, why aren't you saying anything? Why are you targeting the Three-World Island? We didn't provoke you in the beginning. We even wanted to visit your mountain. Oh right, Old Tang went to your palace and was rejected by you. When Old Tang came back he was very angry. Are you happy targeting the Three-World Island? Now that things have gotten to this point it's hard to clean up. What is this called? You reap what you sow. Speak. What? Did? No. Speak. Lu Yi flung the noodle body in his hand and blinked. Only then did he realize that Yuan Du was already dead. It's still not enough. Lu Yi flung the corpse away. Then he looked to the side and saw Qin Xuanba staring at him in horror. He grinned and said softly, "Don't be afraid." Chapter 1987. Outside the Three-World Island, over 100 Yu Yao gathered in one place with bewildered expressions. They had been summoned by Yuan Du. A small number of them were Yu Yao from the First Yuan realm, but most of them were Yu Yao guardians from the various spiritual islands. However, since they were willing to accept Yuan Du's summons, they were more or less related to him. The 100 Yu Yao were led by Yuan Cheng. Yuan Du had brought them here to borrow their strength to break through the Three-World Islands' protective array. After all, as Rizhao, there was no need for him to do something as trivial as breaking the array himself. However, the blood kindred had betrayed him and He Yun had attacked. Yuan Du had no choice but to cooperate and quickly break through the Three-World Islands' protective array. After that, the Rizhao appeared one after another. The 100 or so Yu Yao were completely useless. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they stayed outside the Three-World Island and watched. The current situation was treacherous. Ma Bin was fighting against He Yun and Mo Wenli. Luan Xiao and Yen Miao were fighting against Mu Qin. Yuan Du was severely injured and his condition was unknown. Qin Xuanba and Gu Shi had also disappeared into the blood sea after being hit by the golden light. Yuan Cheng looked at the churning blood sea. His heart was filled with fear. He even had the urge to flee from this place. He could vaguely sense that the situation this time was too big. It had far exceeded Yuan Du's expectations. However, he was still a descendant of Yuandu. If he fled now, there would be no place for him in the 10,000 Elephant Sea in the future. Therefore he hesitated for a moment. Then he gritted his teeth and shouted, "Friends, follow me. Kill Lu Yi and save the Guardians." As soon as he finished speaking, he was the first to charge into the Blood Sea. Most of the 100 or so Yu Yao hesitated for a moment before following him. A small number of them hesitated. However, given the current situation, they had no choice but to retreat. Lu Yi of the Three-Realm Island was indeed renowned. Now, he had even unleashed a Blood Sea secret technique of such a scale. However, he was still only Yu Yao. He was only one person. With over 100 of them working together, how could they not be able to take him down? Moreover, there were still 3 Ricarius in the Blood Sea. They did not believe that these 3 Ricarius had completely lost the ability to resist. Even if they were trapped by that mysterious golden light, it would not be that easy for Yu Yao to kill Ricarius. Perhaps Lu Yi of the Three-World Island had already been captured by one of the Ricarius. They only needed to put on an act now, and in the future they would gain the friendship of the Ricarius protectors. More than 100 figures fell into the sea of blood one after another, like stones sinking into the sea, without the slightest splash of blood. In the Blood Sea, Lu Yi grabbed Qin Xuanba's body. The arrogant Sunshine Cultivator was now like a dried fish. His essence, qi and spirit had been sucked dry, and his vitality had dissipated. He had followed in the footsteps of Gu Shi and Yuandu. Indeed, it would not be easy for Yu Yao to kill Rizhao. Everything else aside, Rizhao's physique was incomparably strong. Lu Yi had to expend a lot of effort to defeat Lionheart because his physique was too strong. Yuandu and the others had been in Rizhao's league for many years. In terms of physique, they were many times stronger than Lionheart. Even if they were trapped and unable to resist, Lu Yi would have to use the sword draw or the Great Windmill secret technique to have a chance to kill them. However, the talent tree's devouring was unreasonable. A strong physique could not stop the roots of the talent tree from entering. At this moment, Lu Yi's eyes were closed. After devouring 3 Sunshine Cultivators in succession, he could vaguely feel that something was wrong with his body. After examining it closely, a look of surprise appeared on his face. On one of the branches of the talent tree, a flower had unknowingly bloomed. The flower was about to wither, and a small black fruit was in the process of growing at the base of the flower. For some reason, when Lu Yi saw the black fruit, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. There was no reason for it, but he could feel that once the black fruit matured, something bad would happen to him. He thought of the previous Dao Tree successor Chaonian. From the looks of it, Chaonian must have also gone through this stage. The great change in his temperament should be related to this black fruit. The Dao Tree could burn everything in the world, but it could not burn the 7 emotions and 6 desires of living beings. These emotions that could not be burned gathered on the talent tree, bloomed, and bore fruit. When it matured, it would completely change a person's temperament. Even at this moment, the black fruit had just taken shape and was far from maturing. Lu Yi could feel that his temperament had changed. It seemed that he was more easily angered and violent. Previously, when he was training in the Azura field, he had tried to devour many shadows. However, that training did not have much of an effect on him. Lu Yi had always thought that the rumors were wrong or exaggerated. Only today did he realize that devouring shadows was completely different from devouring real living beings. This made him slightly wary. He pulled out his consciousness and sensed his spiritual source. It was not perfect yet, but it was not far away. The foundation of the 3 Sunshine Cultivators had greatly improved the quality of his spiritual source. At this rate, if he could devour 2 more Sunshine Cultivators. When this thought arose, it was difficult to suppress. At this moment, Lu Yi suddenly sensed that a large amount of life force had intruded into his sea of blood. The sea of blood was formed by his own blood and qi. Even the slightest change in it could not escape his detection. Thus, after a moment's thought, Lu Yi knew what had happened. This is really... Lu Yi tossed Qin Xuanba's corpse aside and took a step forward. His figure had already disappeared. There was a path to heaven, but you refused to take it. There was no door to hell, but you insisted on barging in. Ancestor. Ancestor, where are you? Within the sea of blood, Yuan Qing continuously shouted, his face filled with fear and unease. He had brought 100 Yu Yao here, but now he could not see a single person beside him. The viscous sea of blood around him made it difficult for him to move, and even the flow of his transcendence energy was much more difficult. However, that was fine. He believed that Yuandu was still alive and should be somewhere at this moment. As long as he could meet up with Yuandu, he would be able to protect himself. In addition, the two sunshine cultivators, Gu Shi and Qin Xuanba, were also in this sea of blood. Lu Yi only had one Yu Yao. No matter what, he had no ability to kill three sunshine cultivators. He did not know what that golden light that could seal sunshine was, but the sunshine cultivators would definitely be able to break free quickly. At that time, they would be able to easily break through the sea of blood and allow this world to see the light of day once more. As he looked around, he suddenly stepped on something. He hurriedly looked down. What he saw instantly turned into a look of shock and horror. This was because the thing on the ground was a corpse, and it was a desiccated corpse at that. The corpse's face vaguely resembled Qin Xuanba's, and even the clothes on it were Qin Xuanba's. No. Impossible. Yuan Qing hurriedly took a few steps back, unwilling to believe what he was seeing. That Qin Xuanba was sunshine, so how could he have died so silently? Suddenly Yuan Qing bumped into something. He turned his head and saw that in the sea of blood, a figure had appeared behind him at some point. This figure was silently staring at him with a pair of scarlet eyes. That gaze? It was like a hungry wolf that had just seen a delicious meal. Lu Yi. Yuan Qing was shocked. He immediately tried to circulate his transcendence energy, but a figure flashed in front of him. Pain shot through his body and his consciousness blurred. He had just become a Yu Yao not long ago. How could he be a match for Lu Yi? In the next instant, an indescribable pain shot through his body, causing Yuan Qing to cry out in pain. After a few breaths, his voice dissipated. Lu Yi tossed Yuan Qing's corpse aside, and his figure disappeared into the sea of blood. He muttered in dissatisfaction, "Too weak." He had finally discovered a pattern. The stronger the cultivator, the greater the benefits he would receive after devouring them. The three Yu Yao who had entered the sea of blood had greatly improved his transcendence energy. However, the Yu Yao who had entered the sea of blood were much weaker. For example, Yuan Qing, who had just become a Yu Yao not long ago, the improvements he received to his transcendence energy were practically negligible. This was most likely related to the quality of their transcendence energy. The higher the quality of the transcendence energy he devoured, the greater the benefits he would receive. The effects of devouring Yu Yao were not as good as Yu Yao's. Fortunately, there were many of them. More than 100 Yu Yao were scattered all over the sea of blood. They couldn't find their enemies, nor could they see their companions. The only thing they could do was continuously circulate their power and bombard their surroundings. This was also the best way to deal with the sea of blood. In the end, the sea of blood was also a kind of secret technique. Since it was a secret technique, it naturally had a limit. As long as one could break through this limit, they would be able to break through it. In the beginning, Lu Yi's sea of blood was indeed turbulent under the ferocious attacks of the Yu Yao. From the outside, it looked like it could shatter at any moment. However, after enduring the most dangerous early stages as time passed, the sea of blood became more and more stable, gradually calming down. Silently, the vitality of the Yu Yao dissipated one after another, and the cultivators who had entered the sea of blood with Yuan Qing perished one after another. In their place, Lu Yi's transcendence energy continuously approached perfection. The continuous devouring caused him to lose himself in thought. At first, he still remembered to occasionally check on the changes in the black fruit on the innate talent tree, constantly keeping an eye on himself. However, as his transcendence energy became more and more complete, and the pleasure of devouring continued to deepen, he completely forgot about everything else. There was only one thought in his mind: to devour everything. After an unknown period of time, there was not a single living being left in the sea of blood. Just as Lu Yi was about to head toward the closest and densest source of vitality, his body suddenly shuddered, and he froze on the spot. In this instant, it was as if some extremely miraculous change had occurred in his body. It was precisely this change that had affected his mind and interrupted his instinctive plan. He was abruptly shocked. His condition just now was very strange. When he checked his innate talent tree again, he discovered that the original flower had long since disappeared. The black fruit had already grown to the size of a fist, and its black color had deepened considerably. In fact, it was even glowing. This thing was already not far away from ripening. A wave of lingering fear washed over him. Fortunately, the changes in his body had brought him back to his senses. Otherwise, if this had continued, he was afraid that he would have followed in Qiao Nian's footsteps, never to return from that path of no return. That was something he absolutely could not accept. I can't devour anymore. He secretly made up his mind. Only now did he have the time to investigate the changes that had occurred in his body. End of chapter. Chapter 1988. Actually, Lu Yi didn't need to check. He already had a hunch. Even though he wasn't actively doing anything, his magic power was flowing madly through his body at an unprecedented speed. His spiritual aperture's magic source was also burning hot. He had perfected his magic source. Lu Yi felt a chill run down his spine. It hadn't been easy. When he was in the early and middle stages of the Moon Jade realm, he didn't have a clear idea of what to do. When he realized that he had to polish his magic source to perfection in order to condense the flower of Qi, he was already in the late stages of the Moon Jade realm. Only then did he set off for the Azura domain. He obtained many benefits in the Azura domain. When he returned to the Wanxiangxi, he bought some, and Jiuyan gave him some. He calmed his mind and sensed that his magic power was flowing faster and faster. Lu Yi could faintly feel a burning sensation between his brows. With his experience of condensing the flower of the body, this abnormal change excited him. This was clearly a sign that the flower of Qi was about to condense. He didn't move or react, only allowing his magic power to flow. Time passed. When the scorching heat between his eyebrows reached a limit, something seemed to have suddenly appeared. In the next moment, the rapidly circulating magic power slowly calmed down. Lu Yi hurriedly opened his eyes and flipped his hand. He took out a mirror-like magic treasure from his storage ring and looked at it. Sure enough, he saw the mark of a crescent moon slowly fading between his brows. The flower of Qi had been condensed. This undoubtedly meant that he had reached the peak of the Moon Jade realm. He had passed 2 stages of the 3-flower art. Now only the flower of God was left. But before that, his magic power was abundant, his Qi and blood were condensed. The Moon Jade realm and the Constellation realm were flawless. Today was the day of the sun. Under normal circumstances, a cultivator would naturally choose a suitable and stable environment to break through to the next realm. At the very least, they had to ensure that they wouldn't be disturbed by others during the process and avoid external factors that could lead to failure. However, Lu Yi had no choice. In order to reach this step, he didn't even hesitate to devour the son of the Wanxiangxi. The Moon Jade realm was so that he wouldn't have any regrets. Now that the flower of Qi had been condensed, he naturally had to break through to the next realm. Besides, he didn't need a suitable and stable environment. He could break through to the next realm at any time a long time ago. The shackles of life and death for ordinary cultivators could be broken at any time for him. This was the benefit of having a solid foundation, as well as the convenience of reaching the peak of his previous realm. He emptied his mind and no longer restrained his body. When his Qi and blood surged and his dermic power surged, the shackles had already shattered. Lu Yi's body suddenly felt light. Previously, he had devoured the foundations of 3 Rizhao cultivators and 100 Yuyao cultivators. Although his cultivation source had been polished to perfection, what followed was a feeling of fullness. This was because he had devoured not only the cultivation sources of those cultivators, but also their blood essence, transcendence energy, and even their souls, everything. With the accumulation of so many cultivators in Lu Yi's body, it was only natural for Yu Yao to feel bloated. During this period of time, he had even channeled his excess power into his own blood sea. This was also the reason why his blood sea was able to withstand the frenzied attacks of the 100 Yu Yao clones. But at this moment, when that layer of shackles was broken, all the feelings of fullness disappeared without a trace. A joy that was even more intense than when he devoured living beings rose in his heart. Unlike before, this joy would not make him sink into depravity. Instead, it made his mind clear. Lu Yi felt as if his body had undergone an indescribable baptism and sublimation from the inside out. His magic power instantly became several times more vigorous, and it continued to increase. Not only his dermic powers but his Qi and blood as well. Lu Yi's flesh and blood were wriggling, becoming more solid and sturdy. This was undoubtedly a huge change brought about by the advancement of a major realm. The reason why Rizhao's physique was so strong, even for cultivators who were originally dermic cultivators, was because of this baptism during the advancement of a realm. This was the transformation of one's dermic powers from the inside out after many years of accumulation. His spirit sea was also rapidly expanding. The seawater became more solid and deep, and the strength of his soul increased by leaps and bounds. Lu Yi could feel that this change would continue until it gradually stabilized. At that time, his Rizhao realm would be completely stabilized. He clenched his fists lightly. His strength had undergone a tremendous change. He didn't know what level he was at now. After all, he had just advanced and hadn't fought with Rizhao yet. The only thing he knew was that even though he had just advanced, he was definitely not comparable to an ordinary cultivator in the early stages of Rizhao realm. He really wanted to find someone to fight. He wanted to have a fight where fists met flesh and swords saw blood. With this thought in mind, he couldn't hold himself back. Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. It seemed that the black fruit on the talent tree wasn't fully ripe yet, but it was still affecting his temperament. He needed to be vigilant. Suddenly, a strange movement came from his waist. Lu Yi looked down and muttered to himself. Then he unsheathed his blade. "You're awake?" he asked softly. His blade was transformed from the chi of the soldier tribe when it swallowed the Panshan blade. All this time, the chi had been in a deep slumber. This was also a characteristic of the soldier tribe. They were an extremely ancient tribe. They didn't have a physical body and could only transform into various kinds of weapons. If a living creature recognized them as its master, the soldier tribe would fall into a deep slumber. Only when the master died in battle would the soldier tribe awaken again and wait for the next master. Lu Yi didn't activate the Panshan blade just now, but it reacted. This made Lu Yi think that the chi had awakened. But under his perception, the Panshan blade was still the same. The chi didn't show any signs of awakening. If that was the case, then what was the strange movement just now? After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. He immediately channeled his transcendence energy into the Panshan blade. The Panshan blade trembled slightly. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. He realized that his guess was correct. The Panshan blade was about to be unsealed. It had been unsealed once before. It was when he first obtained the chi after advancing from a constellation to a Yu Yao. When he first obtained the chi, it was only a spiritual treasure. When he advanced to a Yu Yao, it became a transcendent artifact. This wasn't an advancement, because the true Fang blade was of extremely high quality. After it recognized Lu Yi as its master, it planted layers of seals on itself based on Lu Ye's strength at that time. Only when Lu Ye's strength increased would the seals be unsealed. Now that Lu Yi was sunshine, the chi seals would be unsealed again. This made Lu Yi secretly look forward to it. The chi was already a transcendent artifact. If it was unsealed again, would it become a supreme artifact? Would the chi be a supreme artifact? Lu Yi didn't know, but he would find out soon. He channeled his transcendence energy into the Panshan blade, causing some changes to it. But this wasn't enough. Lu Yi quickly understood the reason. Sunshine was the cultivation of a god. Only channeling his transcendence energy wouldn't be enough. With this thought in mind, he wrapped the Panshan blade with his divine sense. The Panshan blade trembled more and more. In just a few breaths of time, a dim light flashed across the Panshan blade. An extremely sharp aura emanated from the blade, disappearing in a flash. Lu Yi looked at the Panshan saber that had been unsealed once again and frowned slightly. This was different from what he'd imagined. The Panshan blade didn't seem to be a supreme artifact. Compared to before, the blade didn't seem to have changed too much. But, he flicked his finger on the Panshan blade. A bloody gash appeared on his hand and blood flowed out. The Panshan blade seemed to have become sharper and more durable. This undoubtedly made it more suitable for sunshine cultivators. He wouldn't have to worry about the blade being damaged in battle. It would also be more convenient for him to kill his enemies. If the Panshan blade was a high-grade transcendent artifact before, then it should be a top-grade transcendent artifact now. Lu Yi was slightly disappointed that it wasn't a supreme artifact, but he could still accept it. He exhaled softly. The flower of Qi had been condensed and sunshine had advanced. Now it was time to end everything. With a thought, the sea of blood surrounding him retracted. Lu Ye's figure appeared in the blink of an eye. 3 of the 5 sunshine guardians of the Wanxiang Sea had died. Only 2 remained. Including Zixian's He Yun, there were 3 sunshine cultivators to deal with. Previously he only had Ma Bin, Wan Xiao, and Yen Miao. They were evenly matched. Now that he was here, he should be able to change the situation. Right, there was still Hua Xi. With her on the Wanxiang Sea, no amount of sunshine would be enough to kill. Lu Yi was about to look in Hua Xi's direction, but he couldn't help but frown. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the 3 World Islands Trade District. That place was supposed to be peaceful. Even when Yuan Du attacked the 3 World Island, he didn't intend to affect that area. Too many powers were involved there. If the battle really did affect that area, he would offend too many people. But at this moment, the trade district was filled with wails and cries of war. Countless cultivators were fighting there. The streets were littered with corpses and minced meat. What was going on? Lu Yi didn't understand. Even if the incident in the 3 Worlds Island was rather big, the business district should not have been affected. And yet, the business district was already in a state of chaos. Countless shops had been destroyed. Lu Yi even saw cultivators looting goods in the process. He turned his head and saw that the cultivators around the three-world island had disappeared. Even the sunshine cultivators who were fighting were gone. He was the only one standing in the air in the area where the cultivators were stationed. Where was Wuxia? Lu Ye's heart tightened. He vaguely realized that during the half-day when he was concentrating on condensing the flower of qi and advancing to sunshine, something had happened. Otherwise it wouldn't be so chaotic. Looking at the pill room, Wuxia, who was supposed to be standing there, was nowhere to be seen. Lu Ye's expression changed. He hurriedly took out a sound talisman to send a message to Wuxia. At this moment there was a sound not far away and a familiar aura came. He hurriedly turned his head and saw the water of the Wanxiang Sea churning. A familiar figure appeared in his field of vision. Who else could it be but Wuxia? End of chapter. Chapter 1989. Wuxia stood quietly on the sea beside the three-world island. Lu Yi took a closer look and realized that she wasn't standing on the sea, but rather on the back of her pet beast. Her pet beast, which possessed the Pishio bloodline, had shrunk to the size of a table, just enough for Wuxia to stand on. Their eyes met and Lu Yi hurriedly flew towards her. Just as he was about to ask about the situation here, Lu Yi couldn't help but be taken aback when he met Huaxi's eyes. Because her eyes gave him a very unfamiliar feeling. There wasn't the slightest hint of joy from a long-awaited reunion, only surprise and uncertainty. She looked like she didn't recognize him at all. What's wrong? Lu Yi asked nervously. Huaxi's expression was a little blank as she shook her head and said, I don't know, I've forgotten a lot of things. Who are you? Why do I feel like you're very close and important, but I can't remember who you are? Lu Ye's expression stiffened and his face twitched. Don't joke around. Huaxi didn't have any other bad habits, but she liked to play pranks. Lu Yi was deeply affected by this. Back then, when he saw her holding a child, he even mistakenly thought that he had a child, but it turned out that it was actually someone else's child. At that time, Huaxi even tried her best to show him her motherly love. Huaxi didn't say anything. She just looked at him quietly, her beautiful eyes as deep as the abyss. Lu Ye's heart was in turmoil. He reached out and grabbed one of her hands. Circulating his magic power, he spread out his divine sense and carefully examined her. A moment later, Lu Yi looked at the woman in front of him with a complicated expression. Do you really not remember me? There was nothing wrong with Huaxi's body. In fact, it was very good. Her magic power was incomparably pure, and her foundation was solid. What was even more incredible was that her cultivation had reached the late moon jade stage, only one step away from the sunshine stage. He couldn't help but wonder if Huaxi was playing with him. But after thinking about it carefully, Huaxi must have undergone some unknown changes during the years she was sealed. Otherwise her strength couldn't have improved so much. Perhaps these changes had affected her memory. Huaxi shook her head slowly. It's okay. Lu Yi smiled and held her hand. Take it slow. As long as she was fine, everything was fine. As for her missing memories, she would be able to recover them sooner or later. Moreover, now was not the time to investigate this matter. While talking to Huaxi, Lu Yi vaguely sensed that the entire Wanxiang Sea was in chaos. Everywhere there were actually quite a number of Rizhao fighting each other. First, tell me what happened just now. Something must have happened while I was leveling up to Rizhao. Formless palace. Huaxi said. Through her explanation, Lu Yi finally understood where the chaos in the myriad phenomenon sea had come from. The source was actually Yaya. Yaya had previously broken 2 of her jade bracelets, recovering her sealed cultivation and memories. After helping Lu Yi and the others to injure Yuandu, she quickly escaped. After she left, a portal suddenly opened, and a bone clan and a demon race cultivator chased after her. The 2 Rizhao chased in the direction of Yaya's escape, but they left the door open. Lu Yi had actually noticed this at the time, but didn't pay much attention to it. This was because a portal opened through a secret technique from a distance shouldn't be maintained for too long. Just as Lu Yi spread out the sea of blood, wantonly devouring the sunshine and moon jade of the Wanxiang Sea, and then leveling up to Rizhao, a large number of cultivators suddenly rushed out from the portal. Surprisingly, there were more than 10 Rizhao leading a large number of moon jade and star constellations, descending from an unknown place to the Wanxiang Sea. This unforeseen event caught the 2 sides fighting by surprise. This was because these cultivators who suddenly appeared were indiscriminate, and all those who were not on their side were enemies. The Rizhao who were fighting before were all involved. From afar, I heard someone shouting something about Formless Palace, so I guess that these cultivators should be from this faction. Formless Palace. Lu Yi thought for a moment and realized that he had never heard of this faction, let alone where it was located. But this should be the faction where Yaya came from. From the looks of it, the portal didn't disappear immediately after the two Rizhao passed through, causing Formless Palace to investigate the situation in the Wanxiang Sea. Perhaps they used some method to strengthen the portal, and then invaded on a large scale. To any faction, the Wanxiang Sea was a piece of delicious cake. Usually they wouldn't have the chance to invade, but today's chaos gave Formless Palace hope, so they acted decisively. Not to mention completely occupying the Wanxiang Sea, they only needed to ransack the major spiritual islands, and Formless Palace would be able to make a fortune. After knowing the reason, Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect the source of this chaos to be Yaya. But when Yaya helped him, she probably didn't think so much. Formless Palace's subsequent actions were just following the trend. To be able to send out more than 10 Rizhao after sending out the 2 Rizhao, this Formless Palace had a strong foundation. "You'll stay here and protect me?" Lu Yi asked. Wan Xiao, Yan Miao and the rest couldn't stay. They were Rizhao and they were two obvious targets. Only Hua Xi stayed nearby after the chaos broke out. She kept an eye on Lu Ye's situation and didn't let anyone disturb him. Those Rizhao from Formless Palace were busy attacking the major spiritual islands and looting resources. Naturally, they didn't pay much attention to Lu Ye's situation. The Wanxiang Sea was in complete chaos. This was something that hadn't happened for many years. Tracing back to the last chaos in the Wanxiang Sea, it might have been tens of thousands of years ago. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. He vaguely sensed that this chaos wouldn't last long. There were more than 5 Rizhao from the Wanxiang galaxy. There were others. Once they received the news, they would definitely rush over to quell the chaos. They were not the only ones. If the forces behind the other spiritual islands knew that their spiritual islands were robbed and their cultivators were killed, they would definitely not sit back and do nothing. They would definitely send reinforcements. With the connection of the worm path, as long as the news was transmitted in time, it wouldn't take much time. Formless Palace should also know about the situation in the Wanxiang Sea, so their current mentality should be to get something and run. But what about after they left? The Rizhao from the various galaxies gathered in the Wanxiang Sea. What kind of chaos would it be? The Rizhao from the major galaxies were willing to abide by the rules of the Wanxiang Sea and not come here easily because they believed that the Wanxiang galaxy could protect their own interests and the safety of their cultivators. In fact, the Wanxiang galaxy had done a good job for so many years. They didn't give others a chance to interfere. The Formless Palace's chaos had ruined the reputation of the Wanxiang galaxy. They would definitely lose the trust of the major galaxies, giving their Rizhao a reason to interfere in the Wanxiang Sea. Perhaps from now on, the Rizhao from the local galaxy wouldn't be the only Rizhao on the Wanxiang Sea. Other Rizhao could also come and take charge. Although this was only Lu Ye's guess, it was very likely to happen. He was extremely glad that he had advanced to Rizhao at this time. Otherwise, the three-world island wouldn't have much say at that stage. Who wouldn't covet such a top-grade spiritual island? He took out the sound talisman to check and found that both Yan Miao and Wan Xiao could still transmit messages. This meant that the two women were still alive. As for Ma Bin, Lu Yi wasn't worried at all. The famous Green Demon King wouldn't die so easily. The chaos in the Wanxiang Sea was unavoidable, so what should they do to prepare for the future? Moreover, he had killed 3 Nikidoresu from the Wanxiang galaxy. He had formed a deadly feud with the local galaxy, and Ma Bin was on his side. Under normal circumstances, there would be no place for the cultivators of the 3 realms in the vast Wanxiang Sea. Previously, Lu Yi had been forced to retreat and give up the 3-world island. He was still willing to do so. However, now that he had advanced to Rizhao and had a trump card like Hua Xi, he couldn't help but think differently. Why should the 3-world cultivators retreat and give up the 3-world island? This was the foundation that everyone had painstakingly built up. Thinking of this, hostility grew in his heart. The 3-world island was too small. Why not take the opportunity to control the Wanxiang Sea? In this way, the 3-world cultivators could have anything they wanted in the future. The Jade Snail Galaxy would also become a famous top galaxy in the universe sooner or later. Yes, with his current foundation he was actually qualified to control the Wanxiang Sea. Once this thought appeared, he couldn't suppress it anymore. If it were in the past, Lu Yi might have considered it more. However, the black fruit on the talent tree still affected him greatly. This also caused him to be easily swayed by his emotions when considering things. Lu Yi suddenly turned his head to look at the chaotic three-world island. He held Huaxi's waist and said, "Keep your beast and don't leave my side." A familiar scent lingered at the tip of Lu Ye's nose. He greedily inhaled a breath. Huaxi frowned secretly. She acutely sensed that something was wrong with Lu Ye's state. However, she still kept her beast and hugged it in her arms, allowing Lu Yi to hold her. In the next instant, two figures swept across the sky above the three-world island. Lu Yi coldly swept his gaze across. He could tell at a glance that some of the cultivators on the island were different. These cultivators' auras were especially arrogant, unrestrained and unbridled. If he wasn't mistaken, these cultivators with arrogant auras should be from the Formless Palace. At this moment, these Formless Palace cultivators were looting the major stores under the lead of the two Yu Yao. Perhaps some people had resisted before, but they were all killed without exception. Therefore, in the face of these outsiders looting, the cultivators of the major stores didn't dare to resist at all. After all, given the current situation on the three-world island, the two Yu Yao were enough to suppress everything. The Formless Palace had obviously investigated the situation here, so they left behind a few people to deal with the aftermath. Lu Yi was enraged. He immediately shouted, "Stop looting in my house." As soon as he finished speaking, a blood-red light shone around him. Blood arrows shot out from the sky. The Formless Palace cultivators who were looting everywhere, whether they were out in the open or in the dark. Some of them were even inside their houses. At this moment they all suffered a devastating blow. The blood arrows pierced through the bodies of one cultivator after another, taking away their vitality. Even the two Yu Yao who had stayed behind to guard the stores weren't spared. They didn't even see who had attacked them before they lost their lives in a daze. End of chapter. Chapter 1990. In an instant, the chaos on the three-world island was quelled. Countless fleeing cultivators looked up and saw Lu Ye's face. They were all moved to tears. The cultivators of the Formless Palace were unscrupulous. Not only did they plunder resources, but they were also merciless when they killed people. Some of the Formless Palace's cultivators even did many beastly things, causing many beautiful cultivators to suffer. Now that these evildoers were killed by Lu Yi, they were naturally grateful and finally felt a sense of security in this chaos. After dealing with the three-world island, Lu Yi turned and left. The Formless Palace's cultivators landed near the three-world island, so they were very familiar with the situation here, so it was unlikely that they would send more people over. In other words, as long as the merchants on the three-world island did not run around, there was a high probability that there would be no danger. Lu Yi took Huaxi and flew in that direction, following a familiar aura that came from afar. After advancing to Sunshine, not only did his foundation improve, but his flying speed also increased by leaps and bounds. He sensed Wan Xiaoa and Yan Miao's auras in that direction, so they should be fighting with someone. Given the current situation, of course, he had to gather his own people first. But before that, "Tell me in detail about the golden light you shot out earlier," Lu Yi said. He needed to understand Huaxi's current abilities. The vigorous aura blew on Huaxi's ear, making her feel a little numb. Her eyes blurred, but they quickly regained their cold nobility. "That golden light was not my ability. It was Little Melon's ability," Huaxi explained. "Little Melon?" Lu Yi lowered his head and glanced at the Pixiu in her arms, the corner of his eyes twitching. As long as Little Melon devours enough water from the Wanxiang Sea or the corresponding spiritual energy, it can shoot out that golden light. It can even seal sunshine. However, Little Melon's body can only store enough energy to shoot out 2 rays of golden light. After it's used up, it needs to be replenished. This may be related to our strength. When it becomes stronger, it should be able to store more energy. 2 rays of golden light. Lu Yi understood. No wonder Huaxi did not do anything after she first imprisoned Gu Shi and then Qin Xuanba. It turned out that at that time, the energy stored in Little Melon's body had been used up. This was in line with the power displayed by the ancient coin, but compared to the ancient coin that could only emit a golden light and needed to be replenished, after Small Melon swallowed and inherited this ability, it was obviously more useful than the ancient coin alone. However, whether it was 1 or 2 rays of golden light, it wasn't a big deal. If it was placed somewhere else, it might be very troublesome for Little Melon to replenish it, but this was the Wanxiang Sea. As long as it was thrown into the sea, it would be replenished in a short moment. The reason why Lu Yi had the idea of controlling the myriad elephant sea was entirely because of the confidence that Hua Xi gave him. On the 10,000 elephant sea, Hua Xi, who had mastered Small Melon, was an invincible existence in a one-on-one battle. Not bad, not bad. Lu Yi patted Little Melon's head. Gua. Small Melon seemed to be a little unhappy as it rolled its two bulging eyes. As they flew, they passed by several chaotic spiritual islands. All of them were plundered by the cultivators of the Formless Palace. Moreover, the Formless Palace was selective in the targets they plundered. They did not even look at the spiritual islands below the high-class spiritual islands because there was nothing to gain. The targets they plundered were all high-class spiritual islands and top-class spiritual islands. The top-class spiritual islands in particular were their most important targets. It was unknown how many cultivators were fleeing. However, in such a chaotic situation, where could the cultivators escape to? Rather than running away recklessly, it was better to stay on the island and gather the strength of the entire spiritual island. Perhaps then they might have the ability to fight. Moreover, the cultivators who could occupy the high-class spiritual islands were all from wealthy backgrounds. They were all proud and unyielding. Many of them would not be able to give up their home base and escape. Therefore, most of the cultivators on the high-class spiritual islands stayed on their own spiritual islands. If it was the case on the high-class spiritual islands, it would be even more so for the top-class spiritual islands. Lu Yi followed the trail with Hua Xi and saw 5 figures fighting in the sky from afar. Wan Xiao and Yan Miao were among them. What surprised Lu Yi was that Mu Qing was also among them. Lu Yi did not have a good impression of this woman. During the battle with Zi Xian, he was stopped by Yuan Du when he chased the fleeing Lionheart to the periphery of the island of versatility. Mu Qing also appeared at that time, but she did not uphold justice for him. If Jiao Yan was not present at that time, Yuan Du might have really done it himself. Previously, Wan Xiao and Yan Miao teamed up to fight Mu Qing. The two women were not her match even when they joined forces. It was clear that Mu Qing's strength was not ordinary. However, what surprised Lu Yi was that the two sides who were originally fighting fiercely were now showing signs of joining forces. The 3 women were currently fighting with 2 strangers, Rizhao. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that one of the 2 Rizhao was actually from the insect clan. As for the other one, if Lu Yi was not mistaken, he should be from the Three-Eyed clan. This was an uncommon clan, but this clan had a third eye between their eyebrows, so it was easy to recognize them. The Three-Eyed clan called it the Heavenly Eye. Those who could cultivate secret arts with this eye often had mysterious abilities. At this moment, the insect clan was fighting in close combat. Relying on his rough skin and thick flesh, he disrupted the 3 women's formation. The Heavenly Eye of the Three-Eyed clan was already open, constantly shooting out mysterious light from it, making the 3 women flustered. There were also powerful divine senses clashing, invisible dangers lurking in the shadows. After all, Wan Xiao and Yan Miao had just advanced to Rizhao not long ago. The previous battle with Mu Qing was their first battle after advancing to Rizhao. Their performance was not satisfactory, and now they were even more strained. If Mu Qing had not helped them from time to time, they would have been in danger. Even so, Wan Xiao and Yan Miao were still injured. Lu Yi didn't bother to hide his presence. Naturally, the 5 Rikhas who were fighting each other immediately sensed his presence. After realizing it was him, Wan Xiao could not help but be overjoyed. Junior brother Lu. She did not expect Lu Yi to have advanced to Rizhao. From the looks of it, Lu Yi spread out the Blood Sea at the 3-World Island to hide his advancement to Rizhao. As expected of junior brother Lu, the speed of his cultivation advancement was really fast. If she hadn't advanced a little earlier, she would have been left in the dust in terms of cultivation. This distraction was immediately taken advantage of by the Three-Eyed clan's Rizhao. A mysterious light shot out from his heavenly eye and was about to hit Wan Xiao. Yan Miao could not save her in time because she was entangled by the insect clan's Rizhao. At the crucial moment, a mirror appeared out of thin air and blocked in front of Wan Xiao. The mysterious light hit the mirror. The mirror was undamaged, but the mysterious light was reflected back and hit the insect clan's Rizhao, causing him to pause. Yan Miao took the opportunity to slow down. Although she knew that Mu Qing's action was to protect herself, because the 3 women were not a match for the insect clan's Rizhao, and if they lost Wan Xiao, she and Yan Miao would be like fish on a chopping board, but Wan Xiao still looked at Mu Qing gratefully. The debt of saving his life was real. Don't be distracted. Mu Qing shouted. Although she was surprised that Lu Yi had advanced to Rizhao, the 2 opponents were very strong. One was a newly advanced Rizhao, whose cultivation had not stabilized yet. If he forcibly joined the battle, not only would he not be of help, but he would also be a burden. While speaking, Mu Qing sent a message to Lu Yi, "Island Master Lu, please move from the side and disturb them." Lu Yi ignored her and went straight for the three-eyed clan's Rizhao. Although he had just arrived at the battlefield, he saw clearly that the three-eyed clan's Rizhao was more troublesome than the insect clan. As long as he was dealt with, the insect clan's Rizhao would not be a problem. Seeing that Lu Yi did not listen to her advice, Mu Qing was angry, but there was nothing she could do. After all, just half a day ago they were enemies. Now, they were forced to cooperate because of the Formless Palace's invasion. Lu Yi did not cooperate with her, so she could not do anything. Fortunately, the news had been sent out and the other senior brothers were on their way. She just needed to delay for a while. As she was thinking, she suddenly saw a golden light flashing by Lu Ye's side. Mu Qing's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively wanted to dodge. She had seen this golden light twice before. Neither Gu Shi nor Qin Xuanba could dodge it. Once they were hit, they were immediately imprisoned. She had never seen such an unreasonable golden light. At that time, she had observed that the golden light came from a noble Yu Yao woman. However, after the Formless Palace's invasion, she had not seen the woman's figure again. Until now, the three-eyed clan's Rizhao reacted quickly. He dodged to the side almost at the same time the golden light was shot out. However, what shocked him was that the golden light, which he should have dodged, still hit his body. The three-eyed clan's Rizhao's expression stiffened. At this moment, his body and magic power were all sealed. He could not summon any power at all. His entire body fell into the 10,000 elephant sea like a kite with a broken string. He was scared out of his wits. He had heard about the terrifying erosion of the 10,000 elephant sea's water. If he fell into the sea in this state, how could he survive? The only thing he could summon was his soul power. "Save me." His soul power surged wildly. As he attacked in all directions, he sent a message to his insect clan companion. The insect clan's Rizhao's reaction was not slow either. His companion was hit and fell into the sea. He did not wait for his companion to call for help. He forced Mu Qing and Miao Miao to retreat with one move and rushed toward his companion. However, at this moment, another golden light hit him head-on. The golden light covered his body. The insect clan's Rizhao's body also stiffened, and he fell into the sea. The last thing he saw from the corner of his eyes was a human cultivator rushing toward him with a woman in his arms. The sword light was as bright as a waterfall. Blood rained down. Mu Qing was frozen in place. She stared blankly at the horrifying scene in front of her. For a moment she could not believe her eyes. She clearly saw that the three-eyed clan's Rizhao's body was shattered the moment Lu Yi brushed past him. Then came the insect clan's Rizhao. The insect clan's innately strong carapace was difficult to damage even for Rizhao of the same level. However, under Lu Ye's long sword, it was as fragile as paper. End of chapter. Chapter 1991. The powerful insect clan and Rizhao from the three-eyed clan died on the spot in just a few seconds. Even though Mu Qing knew that the terrifying power of the golden light had an extremely strong sealing effect, Lu Ye's terrifying killing intent still terrified her. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that someone who had just advanced to Rizhao and had not even stabilized his realm could have such ruthless means. Therefore, when Lu Yi killed the two Rises and turned to look at her, Mu Qing didn't hesitate at all. A layer of blood mist burst out from her body, and she activated some unknown secret technique. Her whole body turned into a rainbow light and fled into the distance. At that moment she felt a cold murderous intent from Lu Ye's gaze. Her decisive response surprised Lu Yi slightly. She only glanced in the direction she fled in before withdrawing her gaze. The matter of the Wanxiang Sea could be dealt with later. The priority now was still the Formless Palace. "Are you okay?" Lu Yi looked at Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao. The two girls shook their heads. Whether it was the battle with Mu Qing or the battle with the three-eyed insect clan, they only suffered minor injuries. It was not a big problem. "Where is Senior Ma Bin?" Lu Yi asked. The vast Wanxiang Sea was now extremely chaotic. There were movements and aftershocks of battles everywhere, but he couldn't sense Ma Bin's aura. This was undoubtedly not right. Ma Bin was Rizhao. Even if his injuries had not healed, as long as he fought, his aura would leak out. Unless he was no longer in the Wanxiang Sea. Yen Miao said, "When the people from the Formless Palace appeared, Mo Wenli went to fight. He Yun escaped and Senior Ma Bin chased after him." Lu Yi was stunned. This old senior from the 9 states had a strong killing intent. He was clearly not in a good state, but he still went to kill others. However, since he did so, he must have a plan in mind. Lu Yi nodded and turned to look around. After confirming his current location, he thought of something and said, "Senior sisters, this place is not far from Four Corner Island. I'll have to trouble you to take care of it." Four Corner Island did not have Rizhao to hold the fort. Furthermore, the spiritual island that they were occupying was the Baiwei of the past. They would definitely be targeted by the Formless Palace. If Rizhao did not make a move, it would be fine. With Four Corner Island's foundation, they could barely hold on for a while. However, once Rizhao made a move, it would definitely be difficult for Four Corner Island to resist. Four Corner Island and Three World Island had always had a good relationship. In the past few months, Guardian Yao had secretly helped Lu Yi many times. Now that Lu Yi was in trouble, she naturally couldn't sit by and do nothing. Wan Xiaoa and Yen Miao nodded slightly. They didn't stop and immediately flew in the direction of Four Corner Island. Lu Yi continued to fly in another direction with Wuxia in her arms. The Pixiu pet beast in her arms was nowhere to be seen. Evidently, she had tossed it into the omniform sea to devour the seawater. Lu Yi looked down as he flew. He could vaguely see the shadow of the pet beast following closely behind him. Its speed was slower than his, but as long as he brought Wuxia along, this little guy would be able to find him on its own. Hence, he didn't have to worry about it getting lost. In the entire omniform sea, there were many forces on the various spiritual islands. However, there were only 2 places that Lu Yi was concerned about other than his own island. One was Four Corner Island, which Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao were heading to. The other was Five Color Island, where Tao Wu was. In the initial stages of Three World Island's development, they encountered a huge crisis. It was Tao Wu who first expressed his full support and opened a branch of Five Color Merchant Guild on Three World Island. Formless Palace would definitely not let go of a top-notch spiritual island like Five Color Island. Hence, no one knew what the current situation was. However, Lu Yi could feel that in the direction of Five Color Island, Rizhao's aura was rampant. No one was prepared for Formless Palace's sudden invasion of the omniform sea. Most importantly, they had too much Rizhao this time and the timing was too perfect. It was when Three World Island was in conflict. The 5 Sunshine Protectors were all distracted by Three World Island. Among them, 3 died in battle while the other 2 were distracted. This allowed Formless Palace to successfully invade. If it were any other time, Yuan Du and the others would have quickly dealt with the opening of such a door, not giving Formless Palace a chance to invade. When Lu Yi rushed to Five Color Island, the entire place was shrouded in a gloomy fog. Cries of agony could be heard everywhere. Most of the buildings on Five Color Island had collapsed. Countless cultivators had died tragically on the spot. Intense battles broke out everywhere. It was obvious that the cultivators on Five Color Island were fighting like trapped beasts. Lu Ye's expression was gloomy because he couldn't sense Tao Wu's aura. There were many Yuyao on the island, but the aura of those Yuyao was tyrannical. It was obvious that they were all from Formless Palace. When Lu Yi arrived, a spiritual force landed on him. Following that, a faint voice sounded, "I can finally move my muscles." As the voice sounded, a figure rushed out from the depths of Five Color Island. It was obviously Formless Palace's Sunshine, who was in charge of leading the team to Five Color Island. Lu Yi looked up and saw a brawny man with an overbearing physique appear in his field of vision. This guy wasn't tall, but he gave off an extremely sturdy feeling. Moreover, in terms of aura alone, Lu Yi was inferior to him. Lu Yi, who had just advanced to Sunshine, couldn't tell what level the other party was at. He vaguely estimated that the other party was at least in the middle stage of Sunshine. Moreover, judging from the other party's physique and chi and blood, he was obviously a body cultivator. He looked like a human. As for whether he was a human or not, Lu Yi didn't know. In this world there were many races that looked similar to humans, but in fact they weren't. He led the team here to plunder the resources of Five Color Island. He didn't meet a decent opponent at all. It could be said that Lu Yi came at the right time. After sensing for a while, the brawny man frowned and showed a dissatisfied expression. "What's going on?" "A little guy who just advanced to Sunshine not long ago." Saying so, he raised his fist. "I'll crush you with one punch." Lu Yi just looked at him quietly, indifferent to his arrogance. It wasn't until the brawny man was 100 feet away from him that he suddenly patted Huaxi's waist. In the next moment, a golden light shot out from the Pai Xiao in Huaxi's arms. On the way here, the Pai Xiao had already replenished its energy and returned to Huaxi's side. The distance of 100 feet was covered in an instant. The brawny man's arrogant expression changed to one of astonishment. His body crossed the space and rushed in front of Lu Yi. Then he saw Lu Yi raise a long sword. The sword's edge was cold and unrestrained. It was as if the brawny man had taken the initiative to collide with the Pan Shan sword. The brawny man desperately tried to dodge, but he couldn't activate the Fa Li in his body. The sudden change caused him to collide directly with the tip of the Pan Shan sword. The sword sank 3 inches into his flesh. Blood flowed freely. Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. He was secretly surprised by the brawny man's strong physique. Although he didn't use much strength, the Pan Shan sword's quality had greatly improved after he advanced to Sunshine. It hadn't taken him much effort to kill the insectoid before. The brawny man's physique was even tougher than the insectoid's carapace from before. Lu Yi exerted strength in his hand, and the Pan Shan sword pierced through his body. The brawny man's face contorted in intense pain. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't know what the golden light was, but his Fa Li had been sealed. He was like a fish on a chopping board. This situation terrified him. Only now did he realize that Sunshine, who had just advanced to Sunshine, dared to come after him. He must have a trump card. Fortunately, he wasn't stupid. Since he couldn't activate his Fa Li, he immediately tried to activate his soul power. But Lu Yi had already pulled out his Pan Shan sword and kicked the brawny man. After working together with Wuxia several times, Lu Yi discovered a problem. The treasure coin's power wasn't without flaws. This flaw was soul power. The treasure coin's golden light couldn't seal Sunshine's soul power. Sunshine's soul power was so strong that it was impossible for anyone other than him to resist it. Lu Yi wasn't too worried about himself. Even if Sunshine's cultivation was higher than his, he had the Rainbow Divine Lotus to stabilize his soul. As long as he didn't suffer too much impact, he wouldn't be in any danger. But Wuxia was different. With Yu Yao's cultivation, she wouldn't have a good ending if she was attacked by Sunshine's soul power. Even her Pixiu pet beast wouldn't be able to withstand it. So when Lu Yi sensed that the brawny man was about to activate his soul power, he immediately kicked him away. Lu Yi used his strength cleverly. The brawny man only flew a few hundred feet before he fell into the 10,000 Elephant Sea in an arc, creating a huge splash. This guy had thick skin and flesh, so killing him was troublesome. Since that was the case, throwing him into the 10,000 Elephant Sea was the same. No matter how high his cultivation was or how strong his physical body was, if he fell into the 10,000 Elephant Sea while sealed, only death awaited him. Yuan Du was able to survive earlier because he hadn't fallen into the sea while sealed, so he could still struggle for a while. On this side, Rizhao's confrontation only took a short moment to determine the winner. On the Five-Colored Island, not many people noticed the battle here. The cultivators of the Five-Colored Island were busy fighting back, while the cultivators of the Formless Palace were busy killing and looting. Until a sea of blood suddenly spread out, covering the sky and covering the earth. It descended from the sky and enveloped the entire Five-Colored Island. In the sea of blood, Lu Yi and Wuxia stood side by side, but his treasured blood clones had already moved out. After his cultivation improved, so did his treasured blood clones. All of them were in the Sunshine Realm. Under such circumstances, how could the people of the Formless Palace resist? But the reason Lu Yi spread the sea of blood wasn't to make it easier to kill the cultivators of the Formless Palace, but to find Bai An's whereabouts. There was no aura of Bai An here, so Lu Yi suspected that he had already died. But after searching everywhere, he still couldn't find Bai An's corpse. It wasn't until the treasured blood clones asked a few cultivators that they learned that before the people of the Formless Palace came, Bai An had already called for the cultivators of the Five-Colored Island to take refuge in the 10,000 Elephant Island. This guy didn't die. He was smart. Lu Yi heaved a sigh of relief. Now it seemed that many people on the Five-Colored Island had responded to Bai An's call and followed him to the 10,000 Elephant Island, but there were still many people who stayed. Lu Yi didn't know why these people chose to stay. Everyone had their own ideas. If they didn't want to, Bai An couldn't force them. But now many people who stayed had been killed. End of chapter. Chapter 1992. After a short while, the sea of blood disappeared. On the Five-Colored Island, the surviving cultivators exchanged glances with one another, their hearts filled with lingering fear. Lu Yi was already flying toward the island of versatility. He did not go to the Four-Sided Island, as Luan Xiao had just sent a message saying that the Four-Sided Island was safe and sound. It was not even affected by the incident. Although the Formless Palace had sent many people, there were so many spiritual islands in the Vientiane Sea. They would definitely prioritize attacking the top-grade spiritual islands first. There were also some upper-class spiritual islands that were attacked. However, most of the upper-class spiritual islands were safe. Lu Yi asked Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao to guard the four-sided island in case of any unforeseen circumstances. The two ladies were slightly weaker after all, and they were already injured previously. There was no need for them to contribute any further. When Lu Yi arrived, the island of Versatility was already in deep trouble. The defensive formation had been destroyed, allowing the cultivators of the Formless Palace to invade the island of Versatility and wreak havoc. The Formless Palace had long heard of the infamous island of Versatility. Therefore, their first target was the island of Versatility. The other top-tier spiritual islands were secondary targets. To them, the invasion would be considered a success if they could rob the island of Versatility. After all, the wealth accumulated here was unimaginable. The defensive formation of the island of Versatility had a long history. It could be said to be the sturdiest formation on the island of Versatility. Even so, it could not withstand the attacks of the cultivators of the Formless Palace. After all, there were a few Rizhao cultivators attacking the island of Versatility. The extremely rich island of Versatility was the first to be robbed. The shops were not spared either. Those who resisted were killed without mercy. After Mo Wenli escaped from the battle with Ma Bin, he immediately rushed back to the island of Versatility to take charge of the defense. Unfortunately, he was alone and could only watch as the defensive formation of the island of Versatility was destroyed. If it were not for Mu Qing's timely help at the crucial moment, he would most likely be dead. After Mu Qing saved Mo Wenli in a hurry, the two of them made a prompt decision to escape. As a result, the entire island of Versatility fell into the hands of the Formless Palace, with no chance of resistance. Meanwhile, on the island of Versatility, the third palace lord of the Formless Palace, Shang Qingyue, and the fourth palace lord, Zhu Ren, stood side by side. Shang Qingyue was from the feather race. He had a pair of snow-white wings on his back. He was tall and handsome. His noble temperament and unique appearance made him look like an immortal. Zhu Ren seemed to be from the Shadow clan. His entire body was a mass of shadow, and his true appearance could not be seen clearly. Moreover, even this mass of shadow was constantly twisting its shape. No one knew whether it was a man or a woman. Even the name Zhu Ren was not real. It was just a code name. Tianyan, Zhu Zhua, and Kuei Shan have all fallen, Shang Qingyue suddenly said. How could this be? Zhu Ren was a little stunned. His voice was high and low, making people uncomfortable to listen to. As he said this, he quickly took out the note to check. He found that the three Rikashi mentioned by Shang Qingyue were indeed uncontactable. Even the note imprint had dissipated. This undoubtedly showed that the three Rikashi were indeed dead. Zhu Ren was puzzled. The Wanxiang Sea is already in a state of chaos. The few sunshine protectors are either dead or injured. There is nothing they can do. Who could have killed Tianyan and the rest? Suddenly he thought of someone. What about the Cyan Demon King Ma Bin? Only someone as strong as the Cyan Demon King Ma Bin could kill Rikashi so quickly. The reason why they dared to invade the Wanxiang Sea so recklessly was because they sensed the chaos in the Wanxiang Sea through the portal. This gave them an opportunity to take advantage of it. If the Wanxiang Sea did not have those changes today, they would not have done this. Shang Qingyue shook his head. It's not Ma Bin. Ma Bin left after chasing after a demon. If it's not Ma Bin, who could it be? Shang Qingyue raised his head and looked into the distance. It seems that we have underestimated the strength of the Wanxiang Galaxy. Their reaction is also very fast. Zhu Ren followed his gaze and faintly sensed something. He nodded slightly. We should also speed up on our side. With their overall strength, even if the three Rikashi had fallen, they would not be afraid of the Wanxiang Galaxy. However, this time the situation was a little too big. If they continued to delay, the Rikashi from the Wanxiang Galaxy would not be the only one who would come. The other galaxies that had connections with the insect path might also send Rikashi over. At that time, even if they still had 7 or 8 Rikashi, it would be difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. The main goal of this invasion of the Wanxiang Sea was to plunder resources. As long as this goal was achieved, the mission would be considered complete. Send a message to gather. Shang Qingyue spoke. It's time to leave. It was much shorter than expected. Originally, he thought that they would have at least half a day to plunder around, but now they could not wait that long. Fortunately, they had taken down the island of Versatility. Zhu Ren's figure flashed and suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, a series of messages were sent out. On the various top-grade spiritual islands, the formless palace cultivators who were wreaking havoc everywhere quickly rushed towards the island of versatility. Lu Yi was flying towards the island of versatility when he suddenly sensed something. He turned his head and looked in a certain direction. The next moment he raised his eyebrows. Not bad. In that direction he sensed the aura of several Rikashi rapidly approaching the Wanxiang Sea. And coming from that direction, they should all be Rikashi from the Wanxiang Galaxy. They obviously knew about the changes here and hurried over to help. After being in the Wanxiang Sea for so many years, Lu Yi naturally had a rough understanding of the local galaxy's resources. In the early years, the Wanxiang Galaxy claimed to have 11 Rikashi. This number was actually not small. After all, the total number of Rikashi in the 4 galaxies was not that many. However, after Ma Bing killed one of them, there were only 10 left. 5 of them guarded the Wanxiang Sea, while the other 5 stayed in their respective realms. Jiao Yan was one of them. Other than Jiao Yan, there were 4 others. What Lu Yi sensed at this moment was the aura of 4 Rikashi. This undoubtedly meant that the changes in the Wanxiang Sea today had caused the remaining Rikashi to come out in full force. Of course, Lu Yi did not know if there were more Rikashi hiding in the local galaxy. After all, this was a secret of the Wanxiang Galaxy. It was not something that an outsider like him could understand. 4 Rikashi. If he added Mo Wen Li and Mu Qing who were lucky enough to survive, that would make a total of 6 people. It was a decent force. Lu Ye's thoughts turned and he slowed down. He had originally planned to go directly to the island of versatility. However, since the Wanxiang Galaxy's local Rikashi had moved out together, he would let them meet the formless palace first. It would not be too late for him to act according to the circumstances. After he made up his mind, his expression became relaxed. He turned to look at Hua Xi beside him. Sensing his gaze, Hua Xi looked at him with her beautiful eyes. What's wrong? Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. Stop fooling around. When he saw Hua Xi again this time, it was as if she had changed into a different person. She even said that she did not know him. After spending half a day together, Lu Yi could feel that she was extremely unfamiliar with him. However, Lu Yi had a feeling that this was not true. Hua Xi was just teasing him. She had always been like this. Hearing him say this, Hua Xi was silent for a moment. Then she said, "What was I like before? What was our relationship? Why didn't I reject your contact? Also, you gave me a strong sense of familiarity." Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "You used to be very obedient and docile. You listened to everything I said. You did whatever I said and did whatever I asked you to do." Hua Xi blinked and looked at him doubtfully. "Is that true?" "Absolutely." Lu Ye's expression was serious. "As for our relationship, what do you think it is?" "I don't know. We should be very close, right?" "Of course we're very close." Lu Yi nodded heavily. "I'm your only indispensable relative in this world. Even if heaven and earth are destroyed and heaven and earth are turned upside down, you and I will not be separated." Hua Xi lowered her head and fell into deep thought. Suddenly she came to a realization. "I understand. You're my brother." Lu Yi looked at her from the corner of his eyes. The corner of his eyes twitched. He suddenly lost the intention to brainwash her. "Play however you want." He collected his thoughts and looked towards the island of versatility. There was still some distance and he could not see the situation there. However, he could sense that Nicho's aura was chaotic. There were already at least 10 Nichos gathered there. It seemed that Nicho from the Myriad Galaxy had already clashed with the people from the Formless Palace. This time, it would probably be like lightning striking the earth. Nicho from the Myriad Galaxy had been in charge of the Myriad Galaxy for so many years. He had never suffered such a big loss. Naturally, he could not tolerate the invasion of the Formless Palace. Therefore, no matter what, they had to do something. Otherwise, where would their dignity be in the future? As for the Formless Palace, since they had already invaded, they would not be afraid of the Myriad Galaxy. Lu Yi could only wonder. The people from the Formless Palace had come through the portal. How were they going to retreat? They could not possibly use the insect path. If they did, there would definitely be a large number of Nichos chasing after them. He restrained his aura and activated the spirit inscriptions to conceal his and Hua Xi's existence. He quietly approached the Myriad Galaxy. Before he even reached the place, a conflict had already broken out. It was extremely intense. However, the conflict did not last for too long. It soon calmed down. No one knew what was going on. After a while, Lu Yi finally arrived at a reef island near the island of versatility. There were many scattered cultivators gathered here. Many of them looked miserable. Lu Yi found a place to land with Wuxia. He looked around and saw Tao Wu's figure. Tao Wu was undoubtedly injured. There were many cultivators gathered around him. Most of them were from the Stone Clan. They should be the people he brought from the Rainbow Island. Lu Yi hurried forward. After meeting Tao Wu, he learned about his encounter. He had previously called for the cultivators from the Rainbow Island to follow him to the Island of Versatility. However, before he arrived, he heard that the Island of Versatility was under attack. The protective formation was on the verge of collapse. Now, he did not need to go to the Island of Versatility. It was not peaceful there. Since he could not go to the Island of Versatility, Tao Wu did not know where to go. Along the way, he encountered a group of cultivators from the Formless Palace and fought. Fortunately, there were not many casualties. End of chapter. Chapter 1993. Just as Tao Wu led his men to fight the cultivators of Formless Palace, their opponents seemed to have received some kind of order and abandoned them, converging towards the Island of Versatility. Immediately after, the 6 Rikhas of the Wanxiang Galaxy arrived and fought with the Rikhas of Formless Palace for a while. Formless Palace should be retreating. Tao Wu pointed in the direction of the Island of Versatility as he spoke. I wonder what they're setting up now. Lu Yi looked in the direction of his finger and indeed saw a large number of Formless Palace cultivators gathered in a certain area of the Island of Versatility. Among them there were even 2 Rikhas who were busy. At that location, an altar-like structure was rapidly being built. The altar was in the middle, forming the shape of a door. Lu Yi was still wondering how the Formless Palace people were going to retreat. Now that he saw this scene, he immediately understood. That's right, since Formless Palace had the means to use Yaya's aura to open a super long-distance teleportation portal for the source point, then they naturally had the ability to set up a teleportation portal. However, such a bizarre method was a little unimaginable. Lu Yi guessed that the other party had most likely used some kind of special treasure, or else it would not make sense for them to do such a thing. On the Island of Versatility, a large number of Formless Palace cultivators were busy, with 2 Rikhas guarding them. Outside the Island of Versatility, there were 6 figures on both sides of the Formless Palace and the local galaxy facing each other. Lu Yi saw Mu Qing and Mo Wenli in the local galaxy's camp. As for the remaining 4, he did not recognize them. After all, he had never seen them before. The white-haired old man in the lead is called Yuan Se, from the Yuan realm. Tao Wu's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Yuan Se? Lu Yi was curious. What's this guy's relationship with Yuan Du? The two must be related. After all, they had the same surname and were both from the Yuan realm. Tao Wu's background was much better than Lu Ye's. The 5-color domain was also one of the top domains, so he seemed to know more about the Wanxiang Galaxy than Lu Yi. His sudden mention of this to Lu Yi was obviously a subtle reminder. After all, everyone on the Island of Versatility knew about the conflict between Lu Yi and Yuan Du. It said that Yuan Se is Yuan Du's uncle and also his master. Yuan Du could be said to have been taught by Yuan Se. Lu Yi nodded slightly and remembered this matter in his heart. Yuan Du had died at his hands. Although no one had seen the sea of blood at the time, this matter could not be hidden no matter what. Moreover, Gu Shi and Qin Xuanba were also involved. Since Yuan Se and Yuan Du had a close relationship, Lu Yi naturally had to take note of them. Who are the others? Lu Yi asked. As for the other 3, that delicate-looking woman should be Lu Qingqing from the High Heavens continent, just like Qin Xuanba. The one holding Mu Qing's hand should be her cultivation partner, Zhou Yi. He's not from the Vientiane Galaxy, but because of his relationship with Mu Qing, he settled down in the Kunyu realm many years ago. As for the last one, he should be Yen Gai from the Tianyan realm. There were 6 realms in the Island of Versatility Galaxy. They were the Yuan realm, Tianyan realm, Kunyu realm, Illusion God realm, High Sky continent, and Ling realm. It was not that these were the only 6 realms in the galaxy. Instead, Rizhao was born in all 6 realms. Previously, except for Jiuyan's Ling realm, almost every realm had 2 Rizhao. But now Jiuyan was not here. Only 6 Rizhao were gathered here. The 6 of them were imposing, but the other 6 were not weak either. In fact, they were even stronger. Also, the Formless Palace had 2 extra Rizhao on the Island of Versatility. This situation made Yuan Se and the others very uncomfortable. The Island of Versatility Sea had not changed in tens of thousands of years. They rushed here when they heard the news. Naturally, they could see that the Formless Palace was planning to evacuate. The entire island of Versatility was a mess. Apart from the island of Versatility, several top-grade spiritual islands and even dozens of high-grade spiritual islands had been ransacked. Countless cultivators had been killed by the Formless Palace. Now that the Formless Palace wanted to evacuate, the island of Versatility could not just stand by and watch. If the Formless Palace really evacuated safely, the island of Versatility Sea would no longer be under their control. If they could not even protect the lives and wealth of foreign cultivators, what right did they have to control the island of Versatility Sea? However, the Formless Palace was powerful. Although the 6 Rizhao were not few in number, they might not be a match for the Formless Palace. Moreover, at this very moment, countless cultivators were looking at the island of Versatility Sea. If they did not handle this well, the galaxy's reputation would be ruined. On the island of Versatility, the Formless Palace's altar was getting more and more complete. They might be able to use it soon. Yuan Sei knew that he could not delay any longer. He sighed softly and took a step forward. "Shang Qingyu, do you dare to have a bet with me?" Shang Qingyu had a faint smile on his face. He replied calmly, "How do you want to bet? What are we betting on?" If the 6 Rizhao came to stop them regardless of the consequences, it would be troublesome for them to evacuate. However, from Yuan Sei's words, he seemed to have a plan. Shang Qingyu could vaguely see through his intentions. It was exactly what he was thinking. One side wanted to leave while the other wanted to stay. However, neither side was willing to engage in an all-out battle. Since that was the case, the two leaders would fight it out to see who was stronger and who was weaker before coming to a conclusion. Yuan Sei said, "We'll bet on the lives of the cultivators under the Formless Palace's Rizhao. If you win, just take them and leave. I won't stop you. If you lose, what will happen?" Shang Qingyu raised his eyebrows. Yuan Sei's eyes flashed. "Today the island of Versatility will be bathed in blood." His request did not include the Rizhao of the Formless Palace. Even if he really won, he would not let the Rizhao of the Formless Palace be obedient. However, it was different under the Rizhao. If he could defeat Shang Qingyu, the Rizhao of the Formless Palace would be wary of him. By then, he could leave a large number of Formless Palace cultivators behind to account for the suffering of the spiritual islands. "Sure." Shang Qingyu looked nonchalant. His expression was relaxed as if he did not care about Yuan Sei at all. "Then I'll make a bet with you." When he finished speaking, he had already charged towards Yuan Sei. "Strike first and gain the upper hand." Behind Yuan Sei, the 5 Yintian Rizhao were shocked. On the other hand, Yuan Sei seemed to have expected this and did not panic at all. As a member of the feather race, Shang Qingyu was extremely fast. Before he even reached Yuan Sei, the wings on his back flapped. Streaks of white light covered Yuan Sei like lightning. Yuan Sei did not move. He reached out his hand and something appeared in his hand. In the distance, Lu Yi observed with rapt attention. At this time, his eyes couldn't help but light up as he warned Yuan Sei's hand without blinking. At this moment, a treasure that looked like a gourd appeared in Yuan Sei's hand. It had an antique look and was filled with complicated patterns. It looked extraordinary. A treasure gourd. Lu Yi immediately recognized the nature of this item. This was the Vine of Fortune's attribute treasure. It came from the same source as his sword gourd and elixir gourd. As far as he knew, there was a wind gourd in a certain realm. It was the treasure of that realm. However, he had never seen it before. He did not expect to see a treasure gourd in Yuan Sei's hand on the Vientiane Sea. What was the special property of this gourd? What was its power? He could not help but think of something. When he was in the Azura field, he had placed his sword gourd on a high platform. Then he received some information from the Azura field. According to the information, there were a total of 7 attribute treasures on the Vine of Fortune. If he could gather all 7 gourds, he would be able to discover the secret of creation. He did not know what the secret of creation was, but it was definitely extraordinary. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Yuan Sei suddenly shouted, "Burn!" The gourd suddenly emitted a bright red light. It seemed to have become extremely hot. Even the area where Yuan Sei was distorted by the high temperature. In the next instant, a streak of fire flew out of the gourd. The fire was not fierce or big. It was like a small fire snake. However, when this small fire snake appeared, Lu Yi suddenly felt an abnormal reaction from his talent tree. He was slightly startled. He quickly sensed it and felt a desire from his talent tree. This made his expression a little strange. Speaking of which, when he was very weak, his talent tree did react to some fire attribute treasures. However, as his strength increased, his talent tree kept changing. This situation never happened again. Until today, Lu Yi immediately understood that the fire snake released by Yuan Sei's treasure gourd was very useful to his talent tree. There was no reaction in the past because the fire attribute treasures he devoured were not of high quality. However, the fire snake that flew out of the treasure gourd was obviously different. This made Lu Ye's mind active. Now, it seemed that Yuan Sei dared to propose a duel with Shang Qingyu because of this fire gourd. Moreover, it was a killing move. Yuan Sei did not have any intention of probing at all. This showed Yuan Sei's eagerness and his trust in this treasure. The small fire snake slithered. Its speed was not fast, but the white light that Shang Qingyu shot out earlier seemed to have melted instantly. The figure that was charging towards Yuan Sei suddenly changed direction as he exclaimed, "It's a treasure!" Shang Qingyu obviously noticed that the small fire snake was not ordinary. He did not dare to face it head-on. Instead, he moved his body and kept dodging. However, no matter how he dodged, he could not get rid of the small fire snake's pursuit. There were even a few times when the situation was extremely dangerous. Yuan Sei held the fire gourd in one hand and made a hand seal with the other. He stared at Shang Qingyu's figure and his divine sense surged wildly. The wind gourd could become a world-suppressing treasure. Naturally, the fire gourd in his hand was not inferior. This was also the most powerful treasure in the entire Wanxiang galaxy. When he learned that Formless Palace was coming, he brought this treasure with him without any hesitation. He then invited Shang Qingyu to a duel. He wanted to use this treasure to kill Shang Qingyu first. End of chapter. Chapter 1994. In today's situation, many spirit islands had suffered because of the Formless Palace's invasion, and many cultivators had died tragically. All of this was blamed on the Wanxiang galaxy. As such, no matter how many enemies died under the sun, it would not appease the public's anger. Only by killing the enemies under the sun could the Wanxiang galaxy's reputation be restored. That was why Yuan Sei used the fire gourd directly. He wanted to end the battle quickly. Boom boom boom. Within this short period of time, Shang Qingyu could no longer avoid the fire snake's pursuit. He kept activating the power of his Dharma treasures, but no matter what the quality of the Dharma treasures were, they would quickly melt and shatter when touched by the small fire snake. The cultivators who were watching the battle from all directions finally understood the horror of this Dharma treasure. Some of them even shouted with righteous indignation, cheering for Yuan Sei. The scene was unusually lively. Not only was the small fire snake terrifying, but it also seemed to leave behind dark marks wherever it passed. It was as if the space was burned, and there was an extremely dangerous aura coming from those marks. It was obvious that Shang Qingyu was aware of this, so he tried his best to avoid coming into contact with the marks. However, this was exactly what Yuan Sei wanted. He controlled the little fire snake to constantly block Shang Qingyu's movements, causing the space he had to move to become smaller and smaller. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before Shang Qingyu would no longer have any space to move. When that time came, as long as he was touched by the little fire snake, he would either die or be injured. Something's wrong. Behind Yuan Sei, Mu Qing's cultivation partner, Zhou Yi suddenly said. Mu Qing was originally looking at the situation on the battlefield with excitement. When she heard her cultivation partner's words, she was stunned. What's wrong? Look at them. Do they look worried at all? As Zhou Yi spoke, he gestured in the direction of the other Rizhao from the Formless Palace. Mu Qing quickly turned her head and saw that the other Rizhao looked as if they were watching a good show. They were not worried about Shang Qingyu's situation at all. In this situation, either they did not care about Shang Qingyu's life or, the fire gourd is indeed powerful. This special fire that has been nurtured for many years is indeed not something that can be blocked by ordinary means. I'm not as good as it. Shang Qingyu's voice suddenly sounded. Yuan Sei's brows furrowed as he vaguely realized that something was amiss. However, he couldn't afford to be distracted at this moment. His spiritual sense surged again, and the small fire snake instantly straightened its body before shooting toward Shang Qingyu, who had nowhere to run. But even at the critical moment of life and death, Shang Qingyu was not afraid at all. He reached out and grabbed at the air, and a long sword appeared in his hand. Lu Yi could clearly see that it wasn't a sword at all, it was just a sword light. However, the moment this sword light appeared, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, as if a great danger was about to befall him. Furthermore, the feeling that this sword light gave him was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Merak sword energy. Yuan Sei exclaimed in surprise. Good eye. Shang Qingyu laughed loudly. Since I knew that there was a treasure in your myriad phenomenon galaxy, how could I have come here without any preparations? If you want to kill me, then you'll be buried with me. As he said that, his expression turned fierce, and the sword chi in his hand suddenly shot toward Yuan Sei. In an instant the sword chi split into 2 into 4 into 8. A rain of swords enveloped Yuan Sei and the others. The expressions of the 6 sons of the Wanxiang galaxy changed drastically as they channeled their dermic powers. Even so, the 6 of them did not feel safe at all. This was because the Merak sword was a treasure, and the sword chi it produced could be considered the power of a treasure as well. It was not inferior to the special fire that the fire gourd had nurtured for many years. With this sudden change in the situation, it was clearly a situation where both sides suffered great losses. Shang Qingyu would definitely die if he couldn't withstand the special fire, but the 6 sons of the myriad phenomenon C would probably be killed on the spot by the sword chi of the Merak sword. In the end, Yuan Sei did not dare to perish together with his enemy. Shang Qingyu went crazy, but he couldn't go crazy with him. 6 for 1, no matter how he thought about it, was not a good deal. Therefore he did not hesitate at all and instantly recalled the special fire. The small fire snake suddenly spread out and enveloped the 6 of them. The endless rain of swords came crashing down. The fire shattered and returned to the fire gourd in Yuan Du's hand. The 6 figures were revealed, and all of them looked frightened, especially Yuan Sei. His face was extremely pale and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He was clearly injured. Oh. Shang Qingyu raised his eyebrows and smirked. He looked at Yuan Sei with disdain. So I'm still alive. Thank you for showing mercy. Yuan Sei's lips parted, but he could not say a word. He had experienced Shang Qingyu's madness. Looks like I won? Shang Qingyu spoke again. Yuan Sei did not say a word, but he had to admit that Shang Qingyu had won the bet just now. As the special fire was destroyed and its spirituality was damaged, he could not use it again in a short period of time. Without the fire gourd, they could not stop the enemy unless they were determined to fight with their lives on the line. Why aren't you thanking the friends of the myriad phenomenon galaxy for their hospitality? We're about to leave, but they still came to see us off. How courteous. Shang Qingyu turned to instruct the cultivators of the formless palace. On the island of versatility, there was a burst of laughter and laughter. Some people even shouted that the myriad phenomenon galaxy was hospitable and that they would come again next time. Yuan Sei was already mentally unstable. After being provoked, he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The others also had ugly expressions. However, there was nothing they could do in the current situation. Yuan Sei had been defeated, and the number of sunshine on their side was less than the enemy's. If another conflict broke out, the myriad phenomenon galaxy would be at a disadvantage. If only Jiu Yan was here. Mu Qing clenched her fists. Her face was full of humiliation. If Jiu Yan was here, with her strength and the power of the treasure in her hand, Shang Qingyu would not be able to be so arrogant. Unfortunately, Jiu Yan had left the Wanxiang galaxy not too long ago for another place. She did not care much about this at first, but after Yuan Du joined forces with the Black Cloud Alliance to attack the Three-World Island, she realized that Jiu Yan's departure was not a coincidence. Yuan Du had lured her away. Mu Qing's eyes reddened as she was filled with helplessness and grievances that she had nowhere to vent. A Yu Yao flew out from the island of versatility and reported to Shang Qingyu, "Third Palace Master, the array has been set up. It can be opened at any time. Please ask for instructions." Shang Qingyu grinned. "Then, let's go home." Then he turned to look at Yuan Sei and the others. "My friends, you don't have to send me off." On the island of versatility, countless cultivators from the formless palace roared with laughter. The array began to hum and the door was about to open. Yuan Sei and the others could only watch helplessly. However, at this moment Shang Qingyu suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction. A figure slowly walked over from that direction. He wasn't very old and looked to be in his 20s. There was a long saber hanging from his waist. What was even more noteworthy was that he was holding a golden toad in his arms. Shang Qingyu scanned with his divine telekinesis and found that this person should be a weapon cultivator who had just become a sunshine cultivator not long ago. As his aura had not completely stabilized, Shang Qingyu immediately looked away and did not care much. However, who would have thought that this new sunshine cultivator, whom he did not care about at all, would say arrogantly, "You can go, but leave your things behind." Shang Qingyu was stunned for a moment. He looked at the newcomer again with a puzzled expression. Then he looked at Yuan Sei. "My friend, you should take care of your juniors. It would be bad if they cause any misunderstandings." He obviously thought that this new sunshine cultivator was from the Wanxiang galaxy. Since ancient times there were many people who were fearless. However, most of them did not live for long. Now that the Battle of the Wanxiang Sea had been settled, he did not want to cause any more trouble. He just wanted to retreat safely. Yuan Sei glanced at Lu Yi and frowned. He did not expect that there would be another sunshine cultivator on the Wanxiang Sea. He shook his head slowly. This is not a sunshine cultivator from our galaxy. Oh. Shang Qingyu raised his eyebrows. Since he's not one of you, it shouldn't be a problem to kill him, right? Yuan Sei did not speak. He did not notice Mu Qing's excited expression behind him. She did not expect Lu Yi of the Three-World Island to jump out at such a critical moment. A new sunshine cultivator was indeed not worthy of her attention. However, the pet beast in his arms was not ordinary. Mu Qing had seen with her own eyes how Lu Yi killed 2 sunshine cultivators from the Formless Palace. Those 2 sunshine cultivators were quite strong, but when they were hit by that strange golden light, they were instantly imprisoned and turned into fish on the chopping board. If it was him. Mu Qing suddenly looked forward to it. Given the current situation, the situation of their galaxy could not get any worse. Any change would not be a bad thing for their galaxy. What's wrong? Zhou Yi held her hand and could feel the change in her mood. He could not help but ask. There's a good show to watch, Mu Qing whispered. Zhou Yi was puzzled. Everyone here, except for her, did not know about the strange ability of the pet beast in Lu Ye's arms. Even Imo Wenli did not know about it. Previously, when he joined forces with He Yun to attack Ma Bin, he was so focused on Ma Bin that he did not notice anything else. Kill him. Shang Qingyu ordered calmly. He did not need to personally deal with a new sunshine cultivator. Moreover, he controlled the Merak sword chi with his flesh and blood. Although he did not seem to be injured, he actually consumed a lot of energy. At this moment, even his soul was in severe pain. A petite girl suddenly walked out of the formation and went straight to Lu Yi. She should be the girl called Ying. Her aura was much more stable and strong than Lu Ye's. Conservatively speaking, she was at least in the middle stage of the Sunshine Realm. In terms of strength, she gave Lu Yi the feeling that she was about the same as Yuan Du. No one cared about this battle. Everyone in the Sunshine Realm felt that Ying had no chance of losing. That's what she thought too. Her small figure brandished a huge spear and attacked Lu Yi without saying a word. Lu Yi acted as if he did not see it. He also did not show any signs of channeling his magical power or defending himself. However, when Ying was not far away from him, a golden light suddenly flashed in his arms. Today I have something to do. End of chapter. Chapter 1995. Here it comes. Mu Qing stared at the beast pet in Lu Ye's arms. She wanted to see what the golden light was, but even so, she couldn't see it clearly. The golden light flashed in her vision. Ying, who was charging at Lu Yi aggressively, was covered in golden light and became stiff. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Lu Yi reached out and grabbed Rizhao, who was called Ying, in his hand. He unsheathed his Pan Shan saber and placed it on Ying's slender neck. Ying's face was filled with confusion. Everything happened too suddenly. Not to mention the bystanders, even she, who was the one who experienced it, did not notice it. However, at this moment, her body was covered by the golden light. She could not activate her magic power, chi and blood. The cold blade was close to her body. She did not dare to act rashly. She could clearly feel the sharpness of the saber. Even with her mid-stage sunshine physique, she could feel the stinging pain. In other words, this saber should be able to cut her body open easily. She turned her eyes toward Shang Qingyu. Her eyes were full of pleading, trying to convey a message of help. Spiritual treasure? Shang Qingyu frowned. He finally looked at Lu Yi seriously and didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. His perception was not wrong. This young man who had appeared out of nowhere was indeed the newly promoted Rizhao. Ying's strength was definitely stronger than him. However, after that strange golden light, Ying was actually captured by him. This was obviously not his ability, but that golden light. Normal magic treasures couldn't have such mysterious and powerful power. Only a spiritual treasure could. Therefore he was sure that this young man had a spiritual treasure. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to defeat someone stronger than him so easily. He carefully looked at Ying's condition. Her vitality was intact, her breathing was stable, and her body was covered in golden light. He immediately understood that the spiritual treasure should have a sealing effect. What kind of spiritual treasure was this? Shang Qingyu's mind raced. He couldn't remember which spiritual treasure had such power. The reason why the Formless Palace dared to invade the Wanxiang so openly was because they knew the ins and outs of the Wanxiang very well. Before the invasion, Shang Qingyu even used the Merak sword qi to guard against the Wanxiang galaxy's fire gourd. Reality proved that his cautiousness was not wrong. His bet with Yuan Se was more of a competition between the two treasures. He had won by a hair's breadth with his insanity. Who would have thought that such an unforeseen event would occur just as they were about to return home? Shang Qingyu narrowed his eyes and looked at Lu Yi. Young man, do you know what you are doing? It had always been the Formless Palace robbing other forces. Today someone actually wanted to rob them. Moreover, Yuan Se had said that this young man was not Nikitaresu from Wanxiang Galaxy. In other words, he must have come from an unknown galaxy. Therefore, even if he was killed, Wanxiang Galaxy would not retaliate. The power of this sealing attribute treasure was indeed mysterious and hard to defend against, but it wasn't invincible. He really wasn't afraid of anything. I have a question to ask. Lu Yi placed the Panshan saber on Ying's neck and looked at Shang Qingyu. Shang Qingyu was silent for a moment before he said, "Speak." If it was any other day, he would not have bothered with such an arrogant young man. But now that Ying's life was in his hands, he could not refuse. No matter what, he had to save Ying first. What did your holy maiden do? Why do you want to kill her? From the various information obtained before, Yaya was the saint of the Formless Palace. She clearly had the opportunity to restore herself, but she had not done so. Obviously, she knew what would happen if she restored herself. Today Lu Yi was in danger. Yaya was forced to break the jade bracelet and recover the cultivation and memory sealed in the bracelet. After beating Yuan Du into the Wanxiang Sea, she quickly fled. Lu Yi could not ignore this. Since the people of the Formless Palace were in front of him, he naturally had to ask clearly. Shang Qingyu's eyes flashed. You know the saint? As soon as his voice fell, Ying groaned. Blood flowed from her neck, and the blade penetrated her flesh by an inch. Lu Yi looked at Shang Qingyu indifferently. I am the one asking the questions. You only need to answer. You brat. Nikitaresu, who was standing behind Shang Qingyu, was furious when he saw Ying injured. However, he did not dare to act rashly. He was really aggrieved. But Lu Ye's action undoubtedly made the Nikitaresu of the Formless Palace aware of his cruelty. It was foreseeable that if Shang Qingyu dared to talk nonsense again, Ying would suffer. Shang Qingyu's eyes showed a trace of appreciation. Such a cruel and merciless young man was rare nowadays. He was quite to his liking. If it were any other day he would have wanted to subdue him, but now was obviously not the time. He pondered for a moment and said, the saint made some mistakes, so she was hunted down. Seeing that Lu Yi seemed to want to inquire more carefully, he said again, you don't have to ask more about what mistakes she made. This is the secret of the Formless Palace. No comment. Lu Yi blinked and realized that this secret was impossible for Shang Qingyu to say in any case, so he changed the question. You are hunting her down. What is your final attitude? Attitude? Shang Qingyu smiled slightly. If she knows her mistake, then it's naturally easy to talk about it. She will obediently be the saint, but if she doesn't know her mistake, he stopped talking, but his meaning was already obvious. Lu Ye's eyes lowered slightly. What kind of force was the Formless Palace? Lu Yi didn't know before and had never heard of it at all, but this time he learned. Along the way there were many corpses in the usually prosperous Wanxiang Sea. Almost all the top spiritual islands were ransacked. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were the bandits of the cultivation world. Yaya was from the Formless Palace, but now she was being hunted down. It should not be just because she made some mistakes, but it was very likely that there was a difference in ideology. And after all these years of getting along, Lu Yi naturally knew what Yaya's temperament was like. If she was really willing to return to the Formless Palace, she would not have maintained the form of a child all these years. She could have recovered her strength long ago. So the conflict between Yaya and the Formless Palace was irreconcilable. Thinking this way, Lu Yi knew what attitude he should use to treat the Formless Palace. Kid, I have answered your question. Can you let her go now? Shang Qingyu looked at Lu Yi across the air, and there was some impatience in his expression. Lu Yi said loudly, if you want me to let her go, I can. I still say the same thing. You can go, but leave the things behind. Kid. Shang Qingyu's eyes were unhurried. You have just advanced to the Rizhao level, so you may not know the dangers of the cultivation world. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have a treasure. There are many existences in this world that you can't afford to offend. If you let her go now, I can let bygones be bygones, but if you persist. The light of the blade flashed and blood flowed. A severed arm flew out and fell into the Wanxiang Sea, disappearing under the deep sea. Shang Qingyu frowned, and the many Rizhao beside him were full of anger. The countless cultivators who were watching from afar were even more shocked. No one expected Lu Yi to suddenly make a move. Although he did not take Ying's life, he directly cut off one of her arms. The pain made Ying's face contort, but more than that, she was terrified. At such a close distance, she could more clearly and intuitively feel the hidden violence under Lu Ye's calm appearance than Shang Qingyu. What did you say? Lu Yi looked at Shang Qingyu with some confusion. The Wanxiang Sea is windy and strong. I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again. Shang Qingyu's face twitched and he gritted his teeth. I said, I'll kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, several figures rushed out from behind Shang Qingyu. Zhu Ren, the fourth palace master, was the fastest. He was from the Shadow clan and did not have much of a presence. However, at this moment he took the lead and his whole body turned into an almost imperceptible ball of dim light. When these Rizhao made a move together, Mu Qing's expression changed. She quickly looked at Yuan Sei. Senior Yuan, this was an opportunity. Her personal experience made her understand the mysterious power of the golden light better than anyone else. The reason why Shang Qingyu dared to offend Lu Yi and gave the order to kill him was that he was sure that the golden light was the power of a treasure. Since that was the case, it could not be used frequently. This was the disadvantage of most treasures. Basically, they were trump cards that could only be used once in a short period of time. For example, the Merak sword chi that Shang Qingyu used before, and the fire gourd fire that Yuan Sei used, but that golden light was different. The 6 Rizhao of the Wanxiang Sea were no match for it, but if Lu Yi was included, they might be able to fight it. This was the best chance for the galaxy to save face. Don't act rashly. However, to Mu Qing's disappointment, Yuan Sei had no intention of taking the opportunity to make a move. Obviously, he had lost his courage after losing the battle just now. Mu Qing's face was full of bitterness. She could not help but think of Jiu Yan. If Jiu Yan was here with her temper, how could she tolerate Rizhao being so unscrupulous in the Wanxiang Sea? She would have fought with Shang Qingyu long ago. The 6 Rizhao of the Wanxiang Sea watched coldly from the sidelines. Lu Ye's side instantly became a whirlpool of conflict. A series of powerful divine wills rushed over from different directions, easily breaking through his divine soul defense. These Rizhao of the Formless Palace were all veterans. Naturally, they knew the most effective way to deal with a new Rizhao like Lu Yi. It was an attack on the divine soul. As a new Rizhao, his realm was not stable yet. Of course, his divine soul power was far inferior to theirs. Therefore, as long as his divine soul was suppressed, Lu Yi would not be able to resist. In this way, not only could they save Ying, but they could also obtain a powerful treasure. However, to everyone's disbelief, Lu Yi, the new Rizhao, was not directly suppressed as expected under the attack of so many divine souls. Instead, his expression suddenly became ferocious, a reaction caused by the pain in his deity ocean. He swung the long sword in his hand. Ying's head flew up, her face full of confusion and helplessness. The headless corpse fell toward the Wanxiang Sea. Ying! Someone shouted. It was the burly man from before. He seemed to have a good relationship with Ying. Seeing Ying killed, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Lu Ye's eyes were bloodshot. He turned his head and looked to the side. The Pixiu pet beast on his shoulder was shining with golden light. In that direction, Zhu Ren was rapidly approaching Lu Yi. The moment their eyes met, Zhu Ren's heart skipped a beat and he hurriedly retreated. End of chapter. Chapter 1996. The golden light flashed again and Shang Qingyu's expression became extremely shocked. How can this be? Just as Mu Qing thought before, the reason why he wasn't afraid even after witnessing Lu Ye's means was that he was sure that the power of the treasure couldn't be activated a second time in a short time. This new Rizhao who came out of nowhere, thought that he could do whatever he wanted after capturing Ying. He was obviously naive, so he didn't hesitate to give the order to kill him. Who knew that another golden light would flash in front of him? Everyone saw what happened to Ying with their own eyes, so when the golden light erupted, almost everyone retreated. No one wanted to face the power of a treasure directly. When the chaos subsided, the Rizhao of the Formless Palace all had ugly expressions, because Lu Yi had captured another Rizhao. It was the majestic man who called Ying's name just now. This man's body was covered in golden light, just like Ying's blood, qi and spiritual power were sealed and he couldn't move. Not far away, Zhu Ren's face was filled with lingering fear. He was sure that Lu Yi wanted to attack him at first because he was at the front. Fortunately, his reaction wasn't slow, and he retreated faster than everyone else when he realized that something was wrong. This made the other party give up his original plan and attack someone else instead. Once that strange golden light was activated, Zhu Ren admitted that he wasn't sure if he could dodge it. If he was really captured by a new Rizhao, then his reputation as the fourth palace master would be completely ruined. You want to? Lu Yi put the Pan Shan blade on the neck of the majestic man, using him as a shield. He looked over the man's shoulder at Shang Qingyu, his expression slightly twisted. Kill who? Until now, the turbulence in the divine sense sea was slowly calmed down under the light of the seven-colored god lotus. The corner of Shang Qingyu's eyes twitched violently. He was a little confused. Logically speaking, a treasure that could imprison Rizhao so easily must be a treasure. Only a treasure in this world had such strange power, but if it was really a treasure, it didn't make sense that it could be used a second time so quickly. And if the other party could use it a second time, could he use it a third time, a fourth time? There were indeed a lot of Rizhao, 11 of them came this time, but only 7 were still alive and 1 was captured. His life was in danger at any time. There were only 6 who could still fight, the same number of Rizhao as the Wanxiang galaxy. The original advantage they had was gone. Previously, 3 Rikages had died mysteriously. Suddenly, Shang Qingyu's heart skipped a beat. Tianyan, did you kill Zhu Zhuo and Kuei Shan? Initially, he thought that the deaths of these 3 were the handiwork of the Wanxiang galaxy's Nichou. However, after exchanging blows with Yuan Sei, he realized that the Wanxiang galaxy's Nichou wasn't that murderous. He also didn't have the means to kill Nichou silently. But if it was this young man with a treasure in his hand, Lu Ye's expression was still ferocious, but now it wasn't because of the divine sea's turbulence, but because he was suppressing the desire in his heart. Previously, when he captured Ying, there was a voice that kept ringing in his heart, giving him an urge to activate the power of the talent tree to devour Ying and enjoy that ecstasy once again. But he knew he couldn't do that, because if he really did that, it would be too shocking. Moreover, once this hole was opened again, it might be impossible to suppress it forever. Previously, in order to advance to sunshine, he had no choice but to do so in order to complete his spiritual source as soon as possible. Now that he was sunshine, he could no longer continue. The black fruit on the talent tree was an ominous sign. Lu Yi didn't want it to truly mature. I'll say it one last time. Lu Yi gritted his teeth. He didn't know why, but he could feel a fragrance coming from the captured Nichou in front of him. That fragrance constantly activated the power of the talent tree, making it difficult for him to suppress the desire in his heart. He steeled his heart and swung his long sword again. The muscular man immediately followed in Ying's footsteps. His tough body was cut in half and fell towards the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi raised his long sword and pointed it at Shang Qingyu. His face was full of hostility. You can go, but leave the thing behind. The expressions of the faceless palace's Nichou changed again and again. Lu Yi killing Ying just now was beyond their expectations. After all, at that time, everyone thought that Lu Yi would take Ying as a hostage and wouldn't act rashly. But Ying still died. Now that Lu Yi killed again, he was completely unscrupulous. It was as if he didn't care whether he had a hostage or not. And when they thought of the strange golden light that was activated twice, they couldn't help but think of many things. Shang Qingyu thought the most. At this moment he could already confirm that the deaths of Tianyan, Lu Zhuo, and the other 2 Nichou were inextricably linked to Lu Yi. In other words, in just half a day, 5 Nichou from the Faceless Palace had died in Lu Ye's hands. He definitely couldn't have done it with his strength, so what he relied on was the power of the treasure. Even if it was activated once to kill one person, the treasure had been activated 5 times. Which treasure did this King treasure belong to? As the 3rd palace master of the Faceless Palace, Shang Qingyu had studied many treasures in the starry sky. But even with his vast knowledge, he couldn't make any inferences at the moment. But in any case, Lu Ye's unscrupulous behavior made him very cautious. He told himself that there was no such thing as a treasure that could be activated without limit in this world. The other party couldn't possibly use that kind of golden light again. But he didn't dare to gamble. Just as many thoughts flashed through his mind in the Wanxiang galaxy's camp, Yuan Sei suddenly took a step forward and said coldly, "What fellow cultivator Lu means is also what I, Wanxiang galaxy, mean. Mu Qing stood behind him and sighed slightly. Just now, when several Nicho from the Faceless Palace attacked together, she felt that it was an opportunity, so she transmitted her voice to Yuan Sei. In the end, Yuan Sei was unmoved. But now, after Lu Yi withstood the Faceless Palace's attack and even killed one of them, Yuan Sei stood up. Because on the surface, after 2 people from the Faceless Palace were killed, there were still 6 Nicho left, the same number as the Wanxiang Galaxy. Now that they took the initiative to draw closer to Lu Yi, they had one more person than the other party. Moreover, Lu Yi had that strange golden light treasure. This was the Wanxiang Galaxy's last chance to save face. Of course, Yuan Sei wouldn't miss it, so he stood up. Shang Qingyu suddenly turned his head and looked at Yuan Sei coldly. There was anger and disdain in his eyes. He saw through Yuan Sei's thoughts at a glance. In his heart, he was extremely critical of Yuan Sei's judgment of the situation. But it was undeniable that once the Wanxiang Galaxy and Lu Yi joined forces, the Faceless Palace would not be able to gain any advantage. The losses this time were too great. As many as 5 Nicho had died. Although the Faceless Palace was big and had a lot of Nicho, they shouldn't waste it like this. If he handed over the plundered goods, he might not even be able to keep his position as the 3rd Palace Master when he returned. He glanced at Yuan Sei coldly, then turned to Lu Yi. Can you still activate that golden light? Lu Ye's nose was in the air, his face unruly. You can try. Shang Qingyu's eyes flashed. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, suddenly, an aura came from afar. For a moment, all the Nicho's attention was attracted. Lu Ye's expression changed as he turned to look. A moment later, a familiar figure appeared in his field of vision. The person who came was extraordinarily handsome. His aura was not too ostentatious, but when the Nicho from the Wanxiang Sea saw this person, their expressions changed. This was because the person who came was the Azure Demon King, Ma Bin. Why is it so lively? Ma Bin was a little confused. He had been chasing after He Yun, so he had no idea what happened after that. Now that he had returned, he was surprised to find that a lot of Nicho had gathered here. If he hadn't sensed Lu Ye's aura here, he wouldn't have shown himself so openly. He had obviously gone through a tough battle. His clothes were tattered, but even if his aura was unstable, he seemed to be the center of attention. Everyone's attention was on his right hand. At this moment he was holding a head in his right hand. The head's eyes were wide open as if he had died with a grievance. He Yun. In the Wanxiang Sea camp, Mo Wenli's eyes narrowed. At the beginning he had joined forces with He Yun to attack Ma Bin. He had personally experienced He Yun's strength, but he didn't expect him to be dead now. Ma Bin even brought his head back. This was one of Zi Xian's 5 venerable monsters. He was an expert who stood at the peak of the Nicho. How could he die just like that? Ma Bin looked left and right, then looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Obviously, he didn't expect Lu Yi to have broken through to the Nicho realm. When he chased after He Yun, Lu Yi was only Yu Yao. It had only been half a day. His surprise only lasted for a moment. It wasn't surprising for the successor of the Dao tree to advance quickly. He casually tossed He Yun's head to Lu Yi and nodded slightly. Lu Yi took the head, glanced at it indifferently and crushed it to pieces. He Yun was dead. Yuan Du was also dead. Some things had come to an end. As for what happened next, they could only talk about it later. Right now they had to solve the problem at hand. Formless Palace? Ma Bin looked at Shang Qingyu and the others and frowned. Green Demon King Ma Bin. Shang Qingyu had obviously heard of Ma Bin's name. His eyes narrowed slightly. His expression, which had been calm since he came to the Wanxiang Sea, finally showed some seriousness at this moment. Even though he could see that Ma Bin was injured and in poor condition, he still didn't dare to underestimate him. This slight change made the 6 illuminators of the 10,000 Elephant Sea feel bitter in their hearts. This was the Wanxiang Sea, but the people of Formless Palace didn't take them seriously at all. Instead they showed fear of Ma Bin. This comparison made them feel very frustrated. What's the situation now? Ma Bin looked at Lu Yi and asked. Lu Yi said, Formless Palace invaded the Wanxiang Sea, killed people, set fires and looted resources. They were preparing to retreat. I told them to leave the things behind and get lost. They didn't listen, so they started fighting. You didn't lose out, right? Ma Bin looked at him with concern. No. Lu Yi shook his head. That's good. Ma Bin nodded slightly. The corners of Shang Qingyu and Yuan Sei's eyes twitched. They wanted to tell Ma Bin that not only did Lu Yi not suffer any losses, but he also killed 2 Rizhao from the Formless Palace. Now he even forced the Formless Palace into an awkward situation. But no one dared to say it, You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.